Good morning and welcome to everyone watching the live stream on YouTube of this webinar entitled The Balangay Through the Lens of Philippine Maritime History and Boat Culture. We're just past the hour of 10 a.m. here in Manila. For those watching the recording much later, today is the 23rd day of September, the third week of our observance of Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month, or MANAMO for short. My name is Derek Atienza and I will be your moderator. This webinar, the first being organized by the Maritime and Oceans Affairs Office, or MOAO, a dedicated unit specializing in every aspect of Philippine foreign policy relating to the seas, is also the first such lecture being held by our office for an audience outside the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs since the monthly celebration started in 2017. Manamo is a play on the Filipino phrase, your legacy, in this particular case alluding to the sea that surrounds our archipelagic nation on all sides in the Western Pacific or Southeastern Asia, depending on where you're located. We hope through activities like this webinar today, we will be able to build broader and deeper public awareness, primarily among Filipinos, and also for our non-Filipino friends here at home and overseas about the rich maritime history and heritage of the Philippines. Now, with this being the first salvo in what hopefully will be a lasting contribution to the growing body of video literature, we've chosen a topic that traces our people's seafaring traditions. You know, modern day Filipinos are in fact Austronesian speaking peoples whose birthright as exceptional navigators and pioneering boat builders is not nearly as widely known or celebrated here or elsewhere. But thanks to the rare opportunity provided by this online medium now used almost everywhere, which allows us to attract simultaneously a live audience of more than half a dozen time zones from New Zealand and Australia, 4 and 2 hours ahead respectively, to perhaps mainland and island United States, as close as Guam, anywhere from 12 to 18 hours behind. We are able to bring to you 4 leading Filipino specialists who will soon give us an idea of just how rich and how far back we have had this proud tradition. And of course, we have a special focus on the Balangay, the first wooden watercraft excavated in Southeast Asia. Now, before we dive in, we would like to take this opportunity to ask our officer in charge, senior diplomat and lawyer, dynamic multilateralist, speechwriter, and all-around culture vulture, our Assistant Secretary, Igor G. Bailen, to give his introductory remarks. Assistant Secretary Igor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Derek. I'll try to live up to that billing, but not in the next few minutes. Good morning, everyone from Manila, and welcome to our webinar on the Balangay through the lens of Philippine maritime history and boat culture. On behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs, Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office, I am very delighted that you could join us. Thank you very much. This webinar event is a highlight of our celebration this entire month of September of Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month, or MANAMO. MANAMO seeks to raise our national consciousness as an archipelagic state imbued with maritime interests through all its benefits and challenges. MANAMO came about on 14 September 2017, just 3 years ago, when President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed Proclamation 316, designating September each year as MANAMO. This encourages both government, local as well as national, as well as the private sector, to implement programs and activities that contribute to raising our collective awareness about our maritime and archipelagic issues, heritage, and challenges. For this webinar, our lineup of speakers this morning is the best we can possibly assemble. Derek will introduce them in detail as we go along our webinar, but just to give you the topics that they shall be presenting, Our first speaker will be Dr. Maria Bernadette Abrera, who will provide us an overview of Philippine maritime history and boat building tradition. Dr. Abrera will be followed by Dr. Ligaya Laksika, who will talk about the archaeological study of butuan boats and lashed-lug boat building tradition in Southeast Asia. Our third speaker is Dr. Aurora Rojas Lim on pre-colonial trade, cultural exchanges in maritime East Asia. And I'm happy to note Dr. Rojas Lim is a relative of my colleague, Miss Charlotte Tang, whose birthday it is today. So Charlotte is watching. Happy birthday today, Charlotte. And of course, not last but not the least, Undersecretary Arturo Valdez, who will talk about the voyage of the Balangay to bring about the consciousness of the Filipinos on a rich maritime tradition since pre-colonial times, and that they've gone through the summit of Mount Everest, and they've also gone through the seas. So this will be a very great perspective to have from Yusek Valdez. Ladies and gentlemen, next year in March, we will commemorate the 500th anniversary, the quincentennial of East meets West, when the East met the West, and when our ancestors discovered the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan and his then big and modern Spanish ships and galleons. Today is a good day to pause and to think how lapu-lapu and our ancestors in their small but sturdy Balangay, with a determination similar to David against Goliath, defeated an entire empire here in the East. So, Captain Derek, I do not want to get in the way for another minute. I'm very excited like everyone else. So let's all board the Philippine Balangay now, and wish everyone a safe and pleasant journey. Mabuhay! Derek, you're on mute. Derek, you're mute. I can't hear Derek. Derek, you're on mute.
Sir Derek, you're on mute, sir.
Derek, you're on mute. I can't hear you, Derek.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Igor. Thank you for your remarks. We have an incredible audience comprising not only Assistant Secretaries, Assistant Secretaries, officers, and staff at all levels. I'm still okay. I'm okay. We're good. Yeah. There's a bit of delay. So we have a lot of people, actually a lot of officials from the DFA, not just here at the home office, and also consular offices in the Philippines. I can see actually some offices in Mindanao, for example. But we also have foreign service posts in Oceania, throughout Asia, Middle East. I'd like to make a special shout out to our former boss, now Philippine Ambassador to Iraq, Generoso DG Calonge, and of course our diplomats in Africa, Europe, and North America. Outside the department, we have officials from various agencies of government, also doing work in maritime affairs, both civilian and military, as well as, of course, representatives from various diplomatic missions in Manila, and also members of the private sector. We've received wide interest from all sectors, in fact, professionals, members of media, academia, civil society, not just in the Philippines, but overseas, all of whom wanted to learn, listen and learn from our incredible lineup of speakers, as you've mentioned, Asek, who are without exception veteran in-person speakers prior to the pandemic we're having, but who are also currently logging sufficient airtime on this new normal of media. So, of the speakers that we have, as Assistant Secretary Igor has already mentioned, we have two professors from the Philippines' leading public and private universities, an underwater archaeologist, and an adventurer. To use a phrase I've only ever heard spoken of in the battlefield or in chess, the combined experience and expertise of our speakers put together would definitely and easily exceed 200 years. Each of them will make a presentation and with their visuals for roughly 15 minutes each. And afterwards, we will have an opportunity for our audience to ask questions by typing these questions in using their YouTube accounts. So as I understand it, you have to be logged in your YouTube accounts so that you'd be able to type in your questions. And any questions that are similar will be collated by our online team here, and we will direct them to our speaker concerned. Let's begin with our first speaker. And I think we're doing good time. Our first speaker is Dr. Maria Bernadette L. Abrera, who is a professor of history at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Until a month or so ago, she also served as Dean of the UP College of Social Sciences and Philosophy for 3 years from 2017. Dr. Abrera headed an ethno-historical research project on the traditional boat building among the Sama Tausug in Tawi-Tawi, and has written on the cultural aspects of the boat in Philippine history. Dr. Abrera is also the author of Boat Building Tradition in the Philippines from the 10th and 16th centuries, and co-author of a college textbook on Philippine history, Kasaysayang Bayan. Her advocacies include active participation in Oceanides, I suppose that's how it's pronounced, an international scientific research project on the importance of the sea in the major states of evolution of peoples, and serving in the past as president of ADICA, a national professional organization for historians and history enthusiasts. As our first speaker, Dr. Abrera will give an overview of Philippine maritime history just to set us on our journey through our history, including descriptions of Philippine maritime seafaring cultural traditions and colonial records acknowledging Filipino expertise in seamanship and shipbuilding. So, Dr. Abrera, if you're ready, you have the floor.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you, Director Atienza. And thank you for the invitation in this year's commemoration of the Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month. In my presentation, it's really going to be a story of Philippine seafaring. Philippine seafaring and navigation is a story of expansion and of Philippine expertise. It is something that we are good at, and we have been recognized, we have been affirmed in our expertise in navigation and shipbuilding. This shipbuilding began, okay, for the next slide, you will see the outline of my presentation, from the evidence of our earliest maritime history to our tradition, and Balangay to Galion, and then our culture and traditions that are related to the sea. And in the next slide, that is actually the overview of our maritime history, beginning from the inter-island trade networks prior in the Neolithic period, and gradually evolving into long-distance trade networks, and then going into the Java Sea and the Strait of Malacca, where we are recorded to be found in the Strait of Malacca, men from Luzon. And then dominance, raiding and trading in the West Philippine Sea. From the 10th century onwards, we have archaeological and historical records of raiding and trading even up to China, which gives us a lot of ideas about the capacity to navigate and to build the boats that would bring us to those areas. And then beginning from the 16th century onwards, from the colonial period, we would expand to the largest ocean in the world, the Pacific trade route. And the Trans-Pacific trading through the galleon was actually dominated eventually by the Philippine shipbuilders, because the Manila galleons were built in the Philippines by Philippine labor, Philippine wood, and navigated by Filipinos. And we have to claim that as part of our skill and expertise in the maritime seas. And the Sulu zone, of course, that is an economic zone. And from the 19th century, we have the opening of the international ports. Now, for the next slide, I will be showing you. Okay, these are the earliest evidence of our maritime culture and our ability to make ships. The cutting of trees, this one would be from the Neolithic period. So the cutting of trees would be done during a new moon, when the moon resembled a bangka. So from the very earliest period, the culture really mirrored the geographic conditions of the islands. Because new moon resembled a bangka. And why was it interpreted as a bangka? Because the Milky Way galaxy, through the naked eye, when viewed from the Earth, it was interpreted to be a river. So there was a river in the sky, and the moon was the boat. So likewise, travel to the afterlife involved passage through rivers and seas. So that later on we will see the slides, coffins were shaped like a bangka or burial sites, even when in caves or in the land they faced the sea, or they had boat shape. Okay. In the next slide, this is evidence of the cultural development, because you will be presented with the Balangay later on, but that is already evidence of a cultural development and a technological development, because it already involves metal tools. And the picture below shows a metal tool, one of the simplest metal tools, but still you will see that it is still used up to the present, and Sama Tausug builders use that up to now with only one tool. They can build a boat using only one tool. Okay, so from a very simple technological development. Okay, now in the next slide, I will be showing you how this intimacy with the sea and the maritime base of our culture is really reflected in our lifestyle and in our folklore. Okay. So you will see here photos of a burial site in Batanes. It is on a hillside. The hillside faces the sea, and the burial ground, the burial site itself has markers. It has stone markers that are shaped like a boat, and the front has a headstone that serves like the prow of the boat. Okay, so that is the prow. The front part of the boat is the part that faces the sea. The next slide will show you, okay, what is inside, what is beneath the ground of that burial site. And the skeletal frame shows us how a person riding a boat is seated. Although it is of course already flat on the ground, that is how a person would be seated if that person were seated upright on the ship. And that tradition, that burial tradition, you will see in the next slide, is also seen even in the primary burial jars. Now, the primary burial jar, this one, it says that's the primary burial jar in Batanes. And we have a very famous secondary burial jar from Palawan, Manunggul Cave in Palawan. The primary burial jar, why is it shaped like an egg? Because the egg represents a community, meaning to say you all belong to one community. So it is very important. The egg as a symbol of community is very important because it is enclosed. It is very important as a symbol for the community. And then on top of the primary burial jar are the stone-shaped stone markers. The secondary burial jar, secondary burial means only the skeletal remains are placed inside the jar. What is very significant, of course, is the lid of the manunggul because it has a boat and it has been interpreted as the boats bringing the soul of the departed through the afterlife. Okay, for the next slide, okay, that is already when we begin. Okay, when we begin the historical evidence. Now, this historical evidence show us the beginning of long-distance seafaring and therefore the improved capacity to build boats, bigger boats, and the capacity for travel. The archaeological evidence, of course, shows us that much earlier we had the capacity for long distance travel and not simply inter-island. But the historical evidence, the documentary evidence, right now it begins only with the 10th century. The Laguna copper plate inscription, which is at the moment the oldest historical record that we have, shows us that the Manila or the Manila-Cavite-Mindoro corridor was a trading hub within the islands and within the areas nearby of the Philippines, because the language, of course, is Old Java, it's Old Tagalog, it's Old Malay, and it speaks of areas outside of the archipelago, of the Philippine archipelago. So it means it is an indirect evidence of trade and relations, and therefore also of our seafaring. So it speaks indirectly also of our capacity to build boats and to travel that distance, which was already possessed by Filipino navigators. On the right side of that slide, you will see that during the Song Dynasty in China, the records show, and this is very important for us as Filipinos, in our relations, for example, with China, the records show, even from the Chinese records, it shows that they did not discover us, they did not come to us first, but they learned about us through Bornean traders who went to word about Mai. So Mai, of course, we reconstruct it. It's claimed by Mindoro, but it could have been a bigger area, the Manila-Cavite-Mindoro area. Okay, so we were first recorded in Chinese annals because Bornean traders went there in 977 AD and they heard about Mai, and 5 years later, traders from Mai themselves, meaning to say from the Philippine archipelago, they went to Canton with trading goods. Okay, so it confirms through this historical document about the trade and contact between the Philippines and not just Southeast Asian countries, but also even with East Asian countries. Okay, so these Chinese accounts of Philippine navigators and traders reaching its shores begin in the 10th century. There is an indirect allusion to Philippine maritime technology and navigation because it mentions that from Mai in the Philippines arrived in Canton traders bearing precious commodities. Okay. So, among the Philippine boats, the Caracoa has been used in depicting Philippine pre-colonial society. The Caracoa is a warship. It is mentioned in early Visayan and Mindoro vocabularies. Now, you will see here in the 13th century, it is also an indirect allusion to our capacity for seafaring, navigation, and shipbuilding. Previous slide. Okay. It says here, and this one, Zhao Jukwa is a port official. And so he recorded what was being reported by the Chinese who were returning to the Chinese ports. And he said this, dark-skinned men passing through the Babuyan Islands and Taiwan raided the coasts of Fukien. Their tattoos could hardly be seen because their skins were dark as varnish. There would be other records showing that the coasts in what is now Vietnam, the children would cry out in fear when they heard the word Bisaya because these were raiders. Okay, so in the next slide, this is something that I like very much because it's it's not a very well-known epic. It speaks of, that's from the Visayas. It's about Dato Sumanga and Bugbog Humasanon. Humasanon was the lady who was betrothed to Sumanga, but she did not, she was playing coy and she wanted him to bring back a lot of dowry. The next slide will show you the dowry that she was demanding from Sumanga. And Sumanga was getting impatient. The next slide is very interesting. Can we have the next slide? Because it shows you that she was demanding so many slaves, but the islands, in the first four, these islands are within the Philippine archipelago. And then finally, she demands that Sumanga go to China, fill up the ship with slaves and other measures of wealth, and then she will give him her response. Okay, so it captures so much of what our seafaring capacity and our traditions and our relations. So it's very interesting. You will also notice that in our epic, in the Ilocano epic of Biag ni Lamang, Lamang is also revealed there to have two golden balangays which he used for his marriage proposal to Ines Canoyan. And this balangay, the golden balangays of Lamang, he used them to trade between Ilocos and China. So the oral tradition is really very rich about our maritime culture. The next slide shows you, this is already from the colonial period, they recognized how much the Panday or the shipbuilders were really experts in their field so that they would be paid salaries greater than those of the Spaniards. Okay, so next slide before I run out of time, I'm showing you the 17th century indigenous Philippine boats. Okay, indigenous Philippine boats recorded by a Philippine Jesuit missionary in the Visayas. So the Huanga is similar to the Caracoa. That's the largest Philippine boat. Okay, the next slide shows you, okay, it shows you an indication of the expertise of the Filipinos, because it says here, why were we so good at navigation? Because we were learning how to navigate from the beginning of when even as young boys, they were already being trained so that when they grew up to be adults, they could row for the entire day without ever getting showing any fatigue. Okay, so the next slide also shows us. Okay, that's the Caracoa. That's actually from Banda Sea, and it's very important. It's not realistic, but the importance of the crocodile head is very significant for us because next slide shows you. Okay, those are Philippine indigenous boats by the 18th century, but unfortunately, they would already be found only in the Moro Gulf, near Zamboanga. Next slide. Okay, those are the boats for raiding, and what is important for us is those boats for raiding and for battle is seen in the next slide because the next slide shows us that that's the salisipan. We build the hardest wood, the hardest Philippine wood is put in the prow because that is used for bangga. Bangga is really to ram your ship against the enemy ship. That's the original meaning of bangga. So you had to use the most the hardest Philippine wood, and that is shaped like the open mouth of a crocodile. Okay, so that is really something that's very interesting for us, and one of the reasons why Philippine raiders during the colonial period could not be defeated until the steamship came in the middle of the 19th century, because we were really very good in navigation and we had very light boats. They were so swift, they were described as like they were flying in the ocean. So only the entry of new technology, which the steamship was, that was the only time when they could stop Philippine pangangayaw. Pangangayaw is raiding. They termed it piracy, but that's already laden with judgment. That term, piratas, it's already laden with judgment. The indigenous term is pangangayaw. Okay, so in the next slide, you will see, okay, that's already the domination of Philippine shipbuilding because we were already building the galleons. Galleons eventually were already built in the Philippines using Philippine wood, using Philippine labor. They were navigating it using Philippine navigators. We traversed the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean in the world. We went all the way up to Acapulco. We didn't cross to the Atlantic Ocean. But of course, we have a very historical relationship with Mexico also. And we have so much cultural exchange with Mexico because of the Manila Galleon. So Philippine shipbuilding in the colonial world also affirmed our expertise and our capacity to traverse that largest ocean. In the 16th century, the Pacific Ocean was called the Spanish Lake. By the 19th century, it was being dominated by Philippine seafarers, by Philippine navigators and Philippine shipbuilders. Okay, so afterwards, of course, it opened already to international ports. Yes, we will continue. And then we continue up to the present. We continue our domination in seafaring by supplying the seafarers. Okay. We are a hub in the seafaring industry at the moment. And it is very important. But economically and politically, we have problems. But the seafaring and the navigation and the expertise of Filipinos when it comes to the maritime culture that is evident until the present. That is a picture of an ark in Sibutu Island. It shows you the lepa, and it shows you how deeply and intimately we are connected to the sea in our history and our culture. Thank you very much for listening to this brief presentation.
Thank you very much for that actually very fascinating presentation, Dr. Abrera. Um, just listening to 15, 20 minutes of this actually makes, I suppose I speak for the audience as well, that makes us very, very proud to be Filipino. And imagine if we can take every one of these elements and make them into narratives, into stories, into put them into the different media that we have. Imagine what kinds of stories we can show not only our fellow Filipinos, but of course the world. Imagine if we had our own version of Netflix and be able to spin all of these off. So I suppose this even through this limited medium of we have several hundreds of people listening in is already fulfilling the objective that we have of raising awareness to make us proud, to make us a bit more conscious about what kind of history, what kind of traditions we're actually inheritors of that we are that is our birthright. So our main takeaway, I feel, is how so much of this culture and tradition that you've just mentioned, including the geographical scope and the historical reach in the past, that there is such a need for us to have more research on our maritime history, considering that it's an area that continues to influence our political, social, and economic life as a people. So I think we're off to a very good start. And we're going to call now our next speaker. And I'd like to ask for the indulgence of the audience, because actually we've asked our speakers, and of course they're trying very hard to limit their presentations to 15 minutes. But normally, if they were to speak before an audience, such lectures would take maybe even 30 minutes or more. So the fact that they're able to condense it and make it still very understandable and enjoyable, despite the forced shortening of the length, is something of an accomplishment that I'd like to. But I'd like to move on and introduce our next speaker. She is a research specialist at the National Museum of the Philippines, Dr. Ligaya Lacsina. And Dr. Lacsina works as a museum curator, one, that's her rank, at the Maritime and Underwater Cultural Heritage Division. So I think that's kind of hard to pronounce, but let's make it like much D of the National Museum. So she started as a researcher in 2004 at the Archaeology Division's Underwater Archaeology section. But a dozen years later, she was appointed in 2016 to the Much Division. I've just mentioned what it means, which was created specifically as a part of the museum's reorganization. So this Much Division, perhaps I'll be corrected by Dr. Lacsina, conducts curatorial activities and research in the field of Philippine maritime and underwater archaeology. So Dr. Lacsina earned her Master of Arts in Archaeology from the University of the Philippines in 2009 and a Doctorate of Philosophy in Archaeology from Flinders University of South Australia in 2016. Her personal research interests lie in the construction of ancient Philippine watercraft, particularly in lashed-lug vessels as the butuan boats. So lashed-lug vessel is basically the English term for the genre or the kind of boats that balangays are. So Dr. Lacsina's presentation will focus on one of the most legendary ones. We've got all sorts of, our boat building tradition has produced all sorts of types of vehicles, vessels like Falua, Abang, as mentioned by Dr. Abrera, Caracoa, Digaray, Langkaran, Parao, Vinta, all these. But one of the most legendary ones, the one that's actually part of our identity is the Balangay, and specifically the ancient ones first recovered in the floodplains of Butuan in the province of Agusan del Norte in the 70s. So she's going to tell us about this remarkable assemblage of a distinct boat building practice known as the lashed-lug tradition, and evidence of their use extends from as early as the 3rd century until the 20th century. So if you're ready, Dr. Laxina, I'd like to give the floor to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Derek, Sir Derek. That's precisely how we shorten the name of my division. We do call it MACHD. So before I begin, I'd like to thank the Department of Foreign Affairs and especially the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office for inviting me to join this forum. I'm really, really humbled and privileged to be a part of this prestigious panel of speakers. I hate to start with a disclaimer, but I'm having some technical difficulties and I can't really see what's being shown in the presentation. So I hope we go through this at the same time. Anyway, I will be talking today about the archaeology of the Butuan boats, but mostly focus on the lashed-lug boat building tradition. So this might be a bit technical. Let's move into slide 2 with the Butuan boats. So the Butuan boats, they're an assemblage, as Sir Derek mentioned, they're an assemblage of several remains of plank-built boats found in Barangay Libertad in Butuan City, and they're all located within a 1-kilometer radius of one another. They were found accidentally by treasure hunters who were actually looking for wooden coffins which contained grave goods. So when the news of that the treasure hunters had found these ancient boats, they quickly became referred to as Balangay, which we've heard earlier this morning is one of the types of watercraft that are often cited in historical texts. So the most famous of these references, and the earliest, was by Antonio Pigafetta, who chronicled Magellan's voyage in 1521. So when Magellan's ships reached the archipelago's waters, they encountered 2 boats, and Pigafetta wrote that the local inhabitants called their small boat a baloto, and they called their bigger boat a balangay. So the Butuan boats also matched a lot of the boat building descriptions that were written by the Spanish priest Francisco Alsina, who lived in the central Philippines in the 17th century. Alsina wrote a very detailed account of construction of how boats were constructed, and this refers to boats of all sizes. And among the boats he described was the barangay, which he spelled with an R. He grouped the barangay along with some of the larger boats, although he noted that these weren't as big as the Birok and the Caracoa. So next slide. So a little something about plank-built boats. So obviously, by the name, plank-built boats are constructed using planks of wood, as opposed to what we normally see in the Philippines today, where the boat hulls are built with plywood and fiberglass. So during the European colonial period in Southeast Asia, the Europeans admired the skill with how Southeast Asians joined their planks together. So in this slide, you can read the 3 almost identical accounts that were given hundreds of years apart. So the Portuguese Rebello in 1569, when he was in the Moluccas, said that they're made so tight that the seams are barely visible. While Alsina, who we heard from earlier, who was in the central Philippines, said that the seams between one board and the next so joined that they seem to be of a single piece. While Alfred Russel Wallace in 1869 in the Key Islands in eastern Indonesia said that it was often difficult to find a place where a knife blade can be inserted between the joints. Alsina also described how what was done to make the planks fit so tightly, and you can see the pictures by Horridge in 1982 of plank-built boats. Once the hulls were formed, pieces of wood were laid on top of them, and then they were bound tightly with cordage around the boat, and it was tightly wound. Next slide. Oops. Okay, so a little bit more about the plank fastening. In Southeast Asia, planks are generally joined edge to edge. So the hull is formed first with shell first, or planks first, before the frames are put in, and this is typical for traditional boat building all around the world. The practice of frame-first construction actually came later. In Southeast Asia, the planks are joined by wooden dowels and or lacing, and lacing is sometimes referred to sewing. So lacing, which is marked in blue in the slide, it has the advantage of keeping the planks from coming apart. But without dowels, the planks could slip from side to side. These boats were built without metal fastenings such as nails, although they would have had access, as mentioned by Dr. Abrera earlier, they would have had access to metal tools. Next slide. Sorry, I'm having problems on my end. I'm also sorry, can we go back to the previous slide, actually? Southeast Asian watercraft construction plank fastening. So the color photo on the bottom left shows a keel with dowels inserted into pre-drilled holes. The planks that will be assembled next should have matching holes to receive these dowels. So as you can imagine, this would require a lot of skill to do. While the drawings on the right side represent the remains of two plank boats that are joined by dowels and lacing. So if you notice, the lacing is passed through holes that don't go through the thickness of the plank. They actually go from the inner edge into the edge that are joined together. Unlike Arabic or Indian Ocean zone boats, where you could, this is clearly seen from the outside. You can't see it with our laced boats here. Also on the drawings, you'll see these protrusions, and these are carved out of the planks when they're formed. These protrusions we will call lugs. So now we can transition into lashed-lug boat construction. So these protrusions, or the lugs, they run the full length of the planks at regular intervals, and they also align with the lugs on the adjacent planks. They're bored with holes, or drilled with holes, and through these holes, cordage is run to tie or lash boat components such as frames, thwarts, and maybe stringers, whatever you can think of. Lashed-lug construction is a typical boat building tradition in Southeast Asia, though it's probable that other boat construction techniques might have also existed. The lashed lugs are also similar to Viking ship construction, where the lugs are referred to as cleats. It's just a difference in terminology, but basically the same idea. So in the photo example on the top right, cleats are, in this example, the cleats are only found on the bottom part of the hull. And in these ships, the difference in the plank construction or in the plank fastening is that the planks are overlapping and they're nailed together with metal nails or staples, actually. So next slide. Evidence of lashed-lug boats extends to at least 1,000 years. That is, if we be more conservative and we consider the younger end of the date range of the Pontian boat. So there are accounts also of the lashed-lug boats being seen by the Europeans. So we as well by those that we heard from earlier, Rebelio, Alcina, and Wallace, who we quoted earlier, as well as the last recorded use of them, which came from ethnographic accounts in La Malera, Indonesia, in the 1990s. Although I came across this colored photo on the bottom right that suggests that some form of lashed lugs, if you can see in the red circles, may have still existed as of 2015. Unfortunately, this website is not about boat building, and so there's not much other information that's available. Next slide. So this table lists the known archaeological remains found so far, and the youngest dates up to the 16th century. So those are the red dots on the map. The three yellow dots refer to the three historical accounts by Rebelio, Alcina, and Wallace. And the single green dot is La Malera, where the last known examples of lashed-lug boats were observed. So apart from the Southeast Asian region, you'll also see there's Hong Kong there. It's represented, but lashed-lug boats were also seen in the Pacific and Indian Ocean regions, as well as southern Taiwan. Next slide. And here are photos and illustrations of the different archaeological remains of lashed-lug boats. You'll notice that the same concept is implemented in different ways. So they may look different from each other, but at the same time, they're also immediately recognizable as lashed-lug boats, because all you need for a lashed-lug boat is a protrusion in the planks through which there are holes, and cordage can be passed through to tie other boat components. So now that we sort of understand, I hope you're following along, and understand what lashed-lug boat construction is, we can proceed to the Butuan boats. Next slide. So according to reports, the remains of 8 to 11 wooden boats were found starting in the 1970s. Leading up to that, wooden coffins which contained valuable grave goods, were unearthed by the city engineering office while they were digging up canals for flood control activities. So the news of these finds incited treasure hunters to probe the ground using long metal rods. And when they hit wood, they dug whatever it was out. In the process, they must have damaged a lot of archaeological sites, unfortunately. And these maps show the approximate locations of the reported and the excavated sites. Of the reported sites, 7 were excavated by archaeologists between the 1970s and up to today. And just a note, they're labeled and numbered in the order that they were reported and not necessarily in the order that they were archaeologically examined, which is why when we mention them chronologically, the numbers will bounce around. So Butuan boats 1, 2, and 3 were excavated in the late 1970s. Boat 5 was excavated. Boat 5 and boat 7 were both excavated in the 1980s. And boats 4 and 9 were excavated in 2012. Although the excavations of boats 4 and 9 haven't been completed, and they've been temporarily suspended since 2015. Next slide. And to give you an idea of the environment of where the boats were found, they were buried under about 1.5 meters of compact clay and below the water table, so they were always waterlogged. So it's this low oxygen and waterlogged environment that helped to preserve them against decay and parasites. The bottom right photo shows the site after a night of nonstop and heavy rain. So the area where the boats were found are probably along the course of an old river, probably the Agusan River, and which has since changed course. When we as archaeologists take them from this environment, this would require difficult and expensive conservation strategies. And we learned a very hard lesson about this after the recovery of Butuan Boat 5 in the 1980s, as it degraded and warped because of our lapses in conservation. So we have to be careful with what we choose to do with this archaeological resource. Next slide. So Butuan boats 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all lashed-lug boats. That's according to the reports and my observations. Boat 9, which is shown in the bottom right corner, is the exception, as it shows no evidence of lugs so far. But since the excavation hasn't been completed, we'll have to wait and see. It's also considerably larger than the others, at least twice the length. So if you look at the picture of boat 9, in the upper part of the excavation is actually boat 4. Yes, that's correct, boat 4. So they're basically touching each other, and boat 2 was actually found only a few meters away from these two boats. According to old reports, Butuan boats 3 and 7 were reburied soon after they were unearthed. And the report said that boat 3 was smaller than the other boats and composed of only a few planks. The lower left photo is probably boat 3. That was an unlabeled photo dated to 1978 in Butuan City, and it matches some of the descriptions. Boats 1, 2, and 5 were recovered. Boats 1 and 5 are both on exhibit in Butuan City, one at the Butuan Archaeological Park and boat 5 at the National Museum in Butuan. While boat 2 is in Manila and it will be part of an upcoming exhibit at the National Museum of Anthropology. Next slide. As part of my PhD research, I was able to re-examine the previously recovered boats 1, 2, and 5 as well as participate in the excavation of boats 4 and 9 in 2012 and 2013. So I observed a number of typical and distinctly atypical construction features within the lashed-lug boat building tradition, just within these assemblage of boats. So the typical features include that all of the planks are joined by dowels, so there's no lacing or sewing in any of them. They all make use of a keel plank as opposed to a true keel. So a keel plank is only slightly thicker than the rest of the planks, unlike a true keel, which would be a lot more massive. The boats generally make use of long planks, which run almost the entire length of the hull. And the shorter planks would probably be used towards the ends to accommodate for the curvature of the hull. Although most of these smaller planks didn't survive. There's also a gap between the regularly spaced lugs, and this is more obvious in boats 1 and 2. You see regularly spaced lugs running, and then there's a gap towards the middle, and then you have the regularly spaced lugs again. It's not so obvious in boats 5 and 4, but you can find these here also. The Butuan boats also had wing ends instead of stem and stern posts, which I'll go into a bit more detail later. Now for the atypical features, which aren't as expected in traditional boats, because when we think of tradition, we think of unchanging and stable. But we see a lot of differences here. So we'll also talk later about the different trees that were made to construct the boats. That's one. Another is the different lug patterns and lashing holes on the keel planks, which could be related to either technical or aesthetic choices of the boat builder. So if you see, look at the middle column, the bottom illustration shows the keel planks of boats 1, 2, 4, and 5, and how these are designed differently. Again, I can't explain whether these are technical or aesthetic choices of the boat builder. But you have to imagine that these are all carved into the boats, so they would have their different difficulties. Boat 1 would be especially difficult to carve with the 3 protruding lugs on the keel plank. All of the planks are doweled together, but boats 1 and 2 actually have locking pins on them. If you look at the picture on the right, that is a locking pin going through the top of the plank and into the dowel. So this would function in the same way as stowing or lacing, actually. It would prevent the planks from pulling apart from each other. So without the locking pins, which boat 2 and probably boat 4 don't have, what would prevent this from happening? Lashed-lugs might actually help in this regard. So, well, there are a lot of illustrations of ethnohistoric examples showing lashed-lugs that are restricted to one lug and thus one plank. If you click again, these should be encircled. You see, one lashing is limited to one plank. The Punjul Harja boat in Indonesia reveals another pattern. If you click again, where the lashing is goes across 2 planks. It's not so clear. If you click again, the red circle and the white line should appear. So the white line signifies that the transition between 2 planks and how the lashing would help the planks from pulling apart from each other. So in this case, lashed-lugs, apart from being used to secure components of boats, they can also be considered as a direct plank fastening along with dowels and lacing, which interestingly, the Punjul Harja has all of these present. Okay, next slide. So before we move into the next atypical feature, let's consider some conventional components, conventional in quotation marks, because there's actually a lot of variations. But anyway, when you start with the boat, we start with a keel. So that should drop in. And then a stem and a stern post in red. Click again. And then we have the planks. And in shell first construction, the frames come in last. The thing is with the Butuan boats and a lot of the other lashed-lug boats that we see is that they don't have the red part, the stem or the stern posts in this illustration. Next slide. So as it turns out, this isn't actually unusual in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. As you see in these drawings, which depict stemless boats, as Birmingham calls them, in some cases, the planks are fastened to each other to close the ends of the boat, and in other cases, another component is used. And this is sometimes called a wing stem, or as I prefer, a wing end. As an aside, if you look at the bottom left illustration of the Mon, this is actually a lashed-lug canoe from the Solomon Islands in the Pacific. Next slide. So here are the wing ends of the Butuan boats. Actually, when we look at the Butuan boats, neither on all of them, only one end, either the bow or the stern, survived, while none of the ends of boat 4 survived. So that's what we're seeing here. And on the ends, we see these wing ends, and not a stem or stern post. It's interesting that even boat 9, which is much larger, and the non-lashed-lug boat also has a wing end. So this also links it to boat building with the other lashed-lug boats. On the right side of the screen, you'll see both ends, the bow and the stern wing ends, on the Puljal Harjo boat, which is found in Indonesia. And by the way, the Puljal Harjo boat dates, I believe, to the 7th century. We can look at the previous slides later to make sure. And this is a hypothetical reconstruction of how the ends of the boats might have been assembled, starting with the keel, a wing end, then the planks, and then another wing end, and then the planks, and then so on and so forth. Next slide. So surprisingly, there were a variety of trees used to construct the Butuan boats, and the planks alone were made up of 6 different trees. Most surprisingly, 3 different species make up the planks of boat 1, even though it has the least number of planks that survived. This might indicate that it had undergone repairs and replacement at some point using what wood was available, or maybe the boat builder had no real preference in the first place. It's hard to tell. All of these trees are available in the Philippines and Southeast Asia, though Pistacia chinensis, which was used for the planks of boat 5, appears to be less common. As far as my research goes, at least in the present day, they're now found in areas of high altitude like Mountain Province. We still need to identify more samples from boat 9. As you can see in the picture, there are other parts of that boat that haven't been sampled yet. As well as it would be interesting to learn what sorts of trees were used for the dowels of these boats. Okay, next slide. And finally, let's look at the age of the Butuan boats. So samples from boats 1, 2, and 5 were originally radiocarbon dated soon after they were excavated in the 1970s and 1980s. But the results were a bit questionable and problematic because there was a 900-year age difference between the oldest, which was boat 1, which is dated to the 4th century, and the youngest, boat 2, which is dated to the 13th century, so 900 years. So both tests were done in 1978 in Japan. Boat 5 was dated in the 1980s at the Australian National University, and it was dated to the 10th century. So with those previous dates, it's sort of hard to believe that watercraft constructed in the same boat building tradition, found in such close proximity to one another and buried in similar environments, would have such a big age difference. So because of this, additional dates were taken in 2013. So 7 wood samples from 5 boats, and that's including 2 samples from the previously oldest and youngest boats, were sent for AMS C14 analysis at ANSTO. And in 2014, the results came out and they revealed a much closer and consistent range of dates that fall within or close to the 8th to 10th century CE era. They're sort of an outlier, but it's not that big anyway. So that means the original boat 5 date was correct. So let's also remember that these dates, because they're taken from the wood, the dates age the how old the trees were, but not but not when the boats were constructed or used. This might be an issue with older lived or longer lived trees, but I would assume that it would be safe to say that the Batuan boats were used approximately during the same time period, around 1,000 years ago. So to end, I'd like to say that, as is typical with any worthwhile research, the more that we learn actually reveals more that we don't know. So there are a lot more questions that this research brings up, and maybe we can talk about this some other time. But the complexity of the construction of lashed-lug boats seems to have been taken for granted earlier by most. So by looking more closely at the details with a critical eye, we can gain a considerable advancement in knowledge. Many more details in these and other lashed-lug boats, as well as other boats using different construction techniques, may still be studied in the future. Thank you very much. That ends my presentation. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laksina. I don't have any words actually to except for mind-blowing to characterize your presentation. We've actually now had two successive presentations where there have been so many revelations, so many things to unpack, that actually, to be honest, I feel for someone who cares for history, cares for this country, I can't help but feel excited. And they've always said that history is not that sexy, but actually when you look at these or listen to these two presentations, you can definitely say that that's false. And I would even posit that if we start our Filipino children on the right path and actually teaching them the right materials of this type, that makes us a bit more conscious from the very beginning, and we can grow up to be adults who are really proud of their nation. And definitely I can see that there's probably a disconnect between not only the knowledge that our scientists, our presenters have shown us today, but in the way probably there's a problem disconnect with how we communicate it to the public. So I guess that's something that, of course, not only Department of Foreign Affairs, but I suppose any agency in the government and also in the private sector, some museums would have to probably chew on and then maybe put more effort in actually fixing or improving. But definitely looking at your pictures, the audience is taken all the way to Butuan, and as if they were themselves there. I myself, 10 years ago, went to Butuan on a stop on my way to Siargao, and I was very grateful, even though the presentation at that time, 10 years ago, was not that good. I definitely would have to say that seeing the site itself gives you a feel for the actual material evidence. And they always say that the problem with history in the Philippines, at least pre-colonial, is that we don't have material evidence. And sometimes we would have to do a lot of guesswork from, say, like proto-linguistic characteristics and DNA and all that. But as you can show here, even though there was a redating from the earlier age that we had thought the Balangays were, and now it's actually more 8th century rather than 2nd century. But still, it's something authentic. It's something real. Another, I think, takeaway we can have here is that I am glad that you were able to do your study in overseas so that you were able to advance knowledge in the Philippines. So I think shout out to Flinders University. I was myself in Adelaide, and I'm glad that we are able to advance knowledge here in the Philippines through our partnerships with overseas institutions. So I think we will now move on. We are now at the midpoint of our, it's actually going over time, but I would again probably ask now the audience that looks like we're really going to go over 12 noon, and I hope you guys have eaten a hefty breakfast so that we could continue perhaps 15 or so more. Actually, our office, we don't mind as long as you're there staying with us. But I just like to remind our audience, given the very limited medium that we have, and we are not able to ask for people to ask questions live. That means we cannot have questions that expound and perhaps even explain what kind of context you have. But if you could, in any case, describe the question in as full a manner, but while being concise as possible, so that our presenters would understand the context. And please also note, either in parenthesis in some way, who you're trying to ask this question, because there are some overlaps, and it depends what kind of detail or angle you'd like from, or if you'd like to ask all of them, that's also fine. So anyway, we're going to go now to our next speaker, who is actually an institution by herself. I think many of our, as mentioned by Assistant Secretary Igor, actually may have been students of hers or were students of hers. I'd like to, of course, introduce none other than Dr. Aurora Rojas Lim, a former professor and dean of the Asian Center. And she was also a curator of the UP Vargas Museum in late 80s, early 90s, and deputy director of the special project in archaeology and fine arts of the Southeast Asia Ministries of Education in the mid 80s. Now, she was educated, trained initially in English literature. So there's hope for literature majors to still shift and maybe consider if you want to do history at the University of the Philippines. And she took up her master's in the General Studies of the Humanities, combining literature, art history at the University of Chicago, finishing in 1969. And she went on to Cornell University in the United States, where she completed her PhD in the art history and archaeology of Southeast Asia with a minor in Chinese art in 1984. Of course, this Chinese specialty of Dr. Rojas Lim is what actually takes her, has allowed her to become also an expert in that field. She was one of the founding members of the Philippine Association of Chinese Studies and served as president around 19 years ago, 2001 to 2006. And she was editor in the annual PAX newsletter. She has written numerous scholarly papers published in national and international journals and on a wide range of topics. Most of her works deal with art history, archaeology, trade ceramics, and on the maritime Silk Route, and on maritime history and seafarers. So she completed her completed UNESCO project is on the maritime Silk Route and Islamic polity. So it's a very interesting angle, a very good combination. And as you know, she currently teaches as professor of history in the Ateneo de Manila University. So I'd like to call on Dr. Rojas Lim for her presentation on Filipino seamanship and maritime trade and culture. Well, she'll help to further connect the dots for us. Dr. Rojas Lim.
All right. This is Filipino seamanship, and as Dr. Abrera said, so much of our culture is part of our identity. Maritime culture, tradition is much of our national, it should be part of our national identity. Next slide. I want to stress that developments in history, technology, and cultural exchange we are connected to other countries. For example, India, for example, is important because India provided us a script. If you want to know your numbers, the numerals is from India. From India, we also got steel, because by 500 BC, we were our probably part of the contingent from Southeast Asia went to India also to obtain cotton, to obtain fabrics and steel. And don't forget, our written script is from India. The Laguna copperplate inscription is a varied variation of Pallava Brahmi script through Kawi and dated late 8th century. So our written system, our numbers, numerals are not Arabic, they are Indian. All right, so that is from India. And also many semi-precious beads and form of glass from India. From China, we receive a technological and material trade goods with the idea of very important also, just like in India, the notion of a central organized administered government. That is government. So the idea of a government. But our Balangay represents the fundamental social, political, economic unit. So the Balangay doesn't mean only both. It means also the structure of social, political, and also cultural organization. So from India, we receive a lot of philosophical, religious terminology. From China, we receive a lot of technology and the idea of a centralized government. Next slide. Now, what is the South? What is the sea? To our people, we are Malayo-Polynesian people. So we say, Banwa terpisa, Samudra bersatu. The continents divide, the seas unite. So that is a proverb. All right. In fact, there is a shair, there is a song about going out to sea rather than you are blocked by continents. So the South China Sea is to us a unifying, of course also conflict-ridden, a unifying space. It is not a barrier. Next slide. Now, our homeland, the peopling of our archipelago used to be thought to be in Taiwan. Recent archaeological remains showed that we were peopled by people from the excavation sites in Southeast China. And this is very important. The Hemudu assemblage, including features of Austronesian people, production of rice, cultivation, domestication of plants and animals, village settlements, dwellings on stilts. And the dwelling carpentry is very important because that is the technical skill that makes possible boat building. Then the language, of course. A most notable characteristic is the outrigger canoe and the prototype of what is able to build ocean-going ships. Other sites are Huaqiao and Liangji. So our peopling of our archipelago is from Southeast China. Next slide. All right, this is the one. Dr. Laksina talked about dowels, tenon and mortise. So carpentry, the ability to work with wood. By the way, they had not only the adze, they don't only have the axe, they have planes, they have drills to make this mortise, and they have very, very complex joints that is very fundamental in building not only houses on stilts, but also boats. Next slide. Now, I show you this. And since Dr. Laksina talked about the structure of the boats, I will provide another aspect of boat building and navigation, and that is propulsion. The canoes, the outrigger canoes, were propelled by either three-masted masts that movable, and then you have in this picture you have a claw. This is how the technical propulsion of our outrigger canoes. It means this is a claw. This is a claw one, triangular, and it can be three-masted, movable. That means the hull must be very strong, and then the mechanism to be able to turn it according to the wind, so that they can sail straight to the wind. The other one is the button that is like a screen. All right. So our ancestors knew how to propel the boat not only by oars and by paddling, but also by sail. I will not go into the details of sail, but the study of sail and rigging is very important before the introduction of the steam engine. So propulsion is important. That is why the Philippines was a very important source of abaca. Abaca is very important for rigging various sails. Next slide. All right. So propulsion, and this shows you there's so much water. So people went around, so that boats are very important. Next slide, please. All right. Then here, I will just show you. This is the area of our people. So from Southeast China, our people moved down, and some became here. Champa is actually a Malayo-Polynesian kingdom that emerged around the last 100 years BC, Champa. And one of the first to go to China. By 3rd century, it was sending embassies to China. And then, of course, this area here, known as Linyi, Funan, the names of Southeast Asian kingdoms are known from Chinese documents. So Chinese documents provide us the idea. By the 3rd, 4th century, the Chinese were talking about Champa, Linyi, Funan, and then, of course, it became Cambodia, right? This. And of course, the sea trading can be peaceful, but it can be contentious. So here, the Quarrel, Champa, Malay, Polynesian, this is Austro-Asiatic, the Khmer, but both of them received a lot of trade goods. In fact, in Okeo, there is a site here, Okeo. There are Roman remains. So that means the last 100 years BC, there were glass. The Okeo findings are very important because it showed that contacts in prehistory from the Mediterranean. All right. Then, of course, after this, you have then the rise of this one in Palembang, Srivijaya, there. But the late 7th century to the 13th century. And of course, this trade overseas can be usually very peaceful, but most of the time competitive because of the proclivity of human beings for acquisitiveness. That is part of human nature. So Srivijaya contested the Khmer, and actually they are related, Champa and Srivijaya. From Champa, the earliest inscription in Champa was a declaration of independence from Java, from here, from this region. So apparently the Austronesian people are people who, when they dislike the conditions of the mainland, would rather go off to sea. So that is the characteristic also of the Malayo-Polynesian. So Srivijaya, 7th century, expanded to the Malay Peninsula here, up to this Persian, this area here. Yeah. So to control up to the narrow waist of the Malay Peninsula in the Kra area here. So this is Champa. And then afterwards, the Sailendra here in the 8th, 10th century was very envious. Of course, part of human proclivity is envy, jealousy of all the wealth that is coming to Champa, to the Khmer and the Srivijaya. So the Sailendra contested, actually they're cousins, but they contested Srivijaya. And so this is also a contentious one. All right. So that is, then later on, the demise of Srivijaya. Srivijaya was constantly attacked by the southern kingdoms from India, particularly the merchant group, the Tamil, actually related to the Pala kingdom, related to it's a big merchant guild, the Tamil, and they contested because Srivijaya was trying to extract toll. Yeah, remember Lapu-lapu was very angry with Humabon and the Cebu chief because Lapu-lapu was the one who was extracting toll from the Bohol Cebu trade. So Srivijaya was like that. So the Tamils attacked Srivijaya not only once. The date is 1275, but the continuous competition between the southern merchant guilds in India and Srivijaya, because Srivijaya was trying to control the routes here on the Malacca Strait. All right. When Srivijaya fell, then Majapahit moved. That is the time that perhaps our archipelago became regularly connected. But it is possible that even before the rise of Majapahit in the 13th century, our people were coming down. We were not passive. Our people were great travelers, always adventurous, right? Always trying to look out to the sea, to the open sea. All right, so Majapahit. And later on, even Majapahit lost out to Malacca. Malacca was founded in 14, here, I have this, Srivijaya, descendants of, and it coincided with the rise of Islamic merchant guilds. Of course, the Arabs, the Persians, very early were already coming out, yeah, from the Persian Gulf down to Africa and to all the way to Southeast Asia. I also want to stress that from India was the one that gave the first name for all this area. This whole area was named by India, and the name is Suvarnadvipa. Suvarnadvipa means the place of gold. And this name is taken up by Pliny, the Greek historian, the Mediterranean period. So the Mediterranean historians were in touch with India, and it is India that gave the name Suvarnadvipa and led to it lured so many countries, Arabs and so on, to come to this land of gold, because India said, this is the land of gold. All right. So this is important. And don't forget, India provided us the writing system and also numerals. And it is metric. And also provided the concept of sunya, zero. So that is India's contribution to our country. And India, these Tamil raids, very, very fierce, well organized on also their boats. They have similarity. The sailors and navigators learn from each other. The Persians, the Arabs, the Indians, I have no time to show you the various structures of Persian boats. Of course, Egypt 3000 BC, but the Arabs and the Persian method is very much related to the Southeast Asian boats. All right. So here we are, and then of course when Majapahit lost out to Malacca. Well, Malacca was actually founded by the descendants of Srivijaya. Parameshvara was a last descendant. Actually, Parameshvara is a cousin of Majapahit. But as usual, human envy tend to, instead of cooperating, they quarrel. And so the Parameshvara was driven out when the Islamic group, Arabs, Persian, Syrian, all kinds. That's the everybody from the West was Arab. Actually, they were a mixture of countries. All right. So here we are, Malacca, here on the narrow strait. Malacca was founded by Parameshvara, the survivor of Srivijaya, although related to Majapahit, but they quarrel as usual. All right. And this was founded in 1403, which coincided with the great oceanic voyages of Admiral Cheng He, 1403. It coincided. And Malacca became a very strong ally of China. Right. Somehow contacts with India became very weak with the rise of the great Ming fleets of 1403, 1433. So this is Malacca. Yeah, Malacca is a ally of China, and until it was conquered by the Portuguese in 1511. By this time, Asians began losing their control of the trade routes. Next slide. Now, here is our country, and we share so much. All right. I'm glad Dr. Abrera mentioned this area here, very close to Taiwan. All right. So this is constant, because there are small islands here, Yami and so on. So that there's constant intercourse between Taiwan and the Itbayat, the Ivatan, the Yami, and so on are related to the Aborigines of Taiwan. So who were forced to go up the mountain because of the Han migration into Taiwan. So this area here, and Dr. Abrera pointed out the boreal fields in Itbayat, and fishing fleets go up and down here. Then, of course, in the south. Next slide. Now, it is important also to know that our history is so tied up with the rest of the world. And so here, Western Han Empire, Eastern Empire, paralleled Roman Empire, and they both organized strong military forces, expanded territories, consolidated diverse populations that spurred larger scale east-west trade and commerce, wide variety of goods. I mentioned about Ok-Ayo, where we found Roman remains in southern Vietnam. And of course, especially their strategic location in the international trade enabled them to be the earliest trading hubs in Southeast Asia. The exchange embassy beginning 245 AD. So this area here, they were very active. All right. Next slide. All right. But even before the Common Era, the AD period, the theorized explanations were able to migrate from mainland by walking on land bridges during the interglacial period 20,000 to 10,000 BP. Recent evidence show that there were at least 150 kilometers of open sea from mainland Asia to Luzon. The only way they could have migrated was by boats. And here you have all the evidence of early trade, prehistoric trade of lapita ware, which is related to our Masbate Kalanay. This one, excavations of by Professor Solheim, right? Masbate Kalanay. By the way, Masbate Kalanay, Bohol, that area, they have both coffins, right? But they were vandalized and not preserved. The one that is preserved is in Bohol, yeah, the Bohol. I don't know what happened to the Bohol burial boat, but I hope that the Bohol government will take care of it. All right, and related to Sahun in South Vietnam. So the active inter-island trade 500 before the Common Era. Next. So this pottery is thick-walled and so on. Now, bronze. Dongson drum were traded items from 500 to 500 AD. It's tympanum decorated with 5 stars. By the way, the 5 stars represent all the pole star. The brightest star, of course, is Venus, but pole star. And the big and small Dipper and Cassiopeia. So the stars here represent the constellation. That's how they navigated before the introduction of the compass. Then the geometric shapes are common symbols in Southeast Asia. This is the bronze drum, ritual, musical. I bet you the sailors were very good musicians and singers to entertain themselves during this laborious ocean journey. So here, the drum, musical instruments, pray for rain, decoration depict typical Southeast Asian boats. Here is the boat. This decoration is found not only in Southeast Asia, China also, in Yunnan and Sichuan drums. They have this motif. The feathered, the sailors were decorated, yeah, with feathers and caparison and costumes. They have weapons, bow and arrow, and then, of course, this does not depict the propulsion. Propulsion is very important because the way the rigging and the sails are very important in navigation. All right. So the drums, gongs, cymbals, bells, and so on. By the way, the gongs, the flat gongs found in Cordillera, if you go to Kalinga, Apayao, you go to Igorot, Ifugao, you will find bronze that are flat gongs. They come from Guangdong and Fujian. So the mountain people accepted trade goods as far from China. They thought they were from the Ilocos, but the Ilocos did not tell them it came from China. Next slide. All right. Now, here are the distribution of all these gongs. Although we do not have evidence of the drums, but we have cymbals, gongs, and so on. I call your attention. Here is the decoration in Sichuan. This is from Southwest China. All right. This is a drum, Sichuan. And this one is also in Southwest China, Sichuan. I call your attention to the roof, the house. That house form is Igorot, Ifugao, Kalinga, Apayao. Yeah, you go to the National Museum, you can find a replica in the National Museum garden. And then, of course, the ensemble is the ensemble that you go to Maguindanao and to Sulu. The ensemble are set of gongs, yeah, hanging gongs, yeah, that are beaten, stone chimes, drums, cymbals, all right. And of course, this is a human sacrifice, yeah, maybe a captive, war captive, or a criminal, judge criminal who is being sacrificed, and then there are singers and so on. So this is Si Chai Xuan, but they show you material evidence of the close cultural material relation of Southwest China with Southeast Asia. So in China, there is a component, a Malayo-Polynesian component that was eclipsed by the advancing Han dynasty, the northern capital. But today, the Chinese archaeologists realize the importance of the Malayo-Polynesian substratum of Chinese civilization. All right. So next slide. All right. On prehistoric trade. Another evidence of prehistoric inter-island trade are nephrite jade artifacts found in Southeast China and Southeast Asia. Carnelian and agate beads from India were also prized. By the way, we also received our written script from India, right, by the late 8th to 10th century. So the Laguna copper plate is the language there, the script is a modified Brahmi Pallava script and Kawi. Yes, so right. So from India, and don't forget numerals. We received that from India. All right, here are we have traced, the source of nephrite has been traced to Fangdian, Taiwan. This has been analyzed in Australia, and this illustrated above were excavated from Tavon Caves in Quezon, Palawan. We have in Batangas and parts of Bulacan some NIF from Jadate, but the ones found in Palawan, this one excavated in Palawan, is from Fangdian, from China. All right. So, and these are found, all of this, what we call Ling Ling O. We call Ling Ling O. All right. So, and of course, nephrite beads, this one, two-headed one, ear plug, this one, and they are all found in South China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. Next slide. Now, what do we have here? The spice trade. The other nations, besides being lured to Southeast Asia because it is Suvarna Dvipa, the land of gold. Another magnet for international trade in spice. Spice is not only for flavoring, but they were medicinal. All right. So the peak is AD, connected coastal trading areas in Asia to Africa, Middle East, Mediterranean, and a wide range of products were exchanged in the ports of the world from coastal market to inland. So here, in exchange, these are all the products. All right. Distribution of change. All right. And here, this is, there is Okio, where Roman remains were found. Right. So, and next slide. Right. Now, by the late 9th century, our archipelago became regularly connected directly from South China to Luzon, here on the western part of Luzon, down to Visayas, either connect to Almahera. This is the Spice Island here. And the Spice Islands were also medicinal. Also in Southeast Asia, they learned a lot about many pharmaceuticals for skin disease, for cough, cold, fever, kind of pneumonia, and also a cure for leprosy, chalmugra oil, right? And of course, don't forget also the tropical fauna and flora, coconut, banana, all kinds. And another plant that is often ignored but very important in providing subsistence to our sailors and navigators is the Autocarpus altilis. This is breadfruit, and this is a very important fruit that we have forgotten. But it is, when ripe, it can be eaten. It tastes like potato and chestnut, a mixture of that. When raw, you have to boil it. But it is an important plant that, together with coconut, that is very important to sustain the sailors, to feed them in the long journey. All right. Next slide, please. All right. So, trade items from China included metal tools, implements, and equipment, from needles, nails. That's why Dr. Abrera talked about the Visaya who plundered the coast of China because they were looking for needles, nails, scissors, sharp-edged tools, iron cauldrons, yung mga kawa, right? Weights and measures, tea, silk, textiles, porcelain, paper, almanacs, garments, beads, by what they call Trocadero beads, the green one. It's found in Museo Guimet in a branch of the Louvre. You can find the beads, trade beads there. And of course, we have some in the National Museum. And then made of jade, semi-precious stones, folding umbrellas, by the way, another very interesting bead are the eye beads, right? So eye beads, I will not go to the detail, but it became a very important source of currency before coinage was invented. Beads were measures of currency. And of course, the Cyprea moneta. All right, what did the Chinese sell us besides all of this? Folding umbrellas, folding fans, lacquerware, mostly medicinal cabinet, chests, and the compass. This is very important. Weights and measures and compass. Right. Weights and measures were metric. All right. This is important. Right. Then how did we pay for these trade items? For expensive porcelain, metals, silk, and other fine fabrics, they paid in gold. So the Chinese accepted. And our ancestors were very good in weighing their gold dust. So they were also very good in metallurgy because they could purify the ore with mercury, very poisonous, but and pulverize it by roasting. All right. So each big trader would have a pouch filled with gold powder to pay for all of this. China imported what? Beeswax before plastics, before polymers. Beeswax, very important. And of course, honey, right? Beeswax, important for preserving and for sealant. Almasiga, another very important. It is used to seal the seams of the Balangay, because the Balangay is culver type. Yeah, that is edge planked, longitudinal planks alongside, and then side to side, and then sealed with almasiga. So they mentioned that it's so tightly sealed that you cannot put a sharp knife in between the planks, because they were and almasiga, we provided this. Benzoin is very important because it's a medicinal for cold, any respiratory tract, and all kinds of resins, of course. Yes, all kinds of resins before the invention of polymer. And sandalwood, camphor, because it's very important for spice, and also they believe that the smoke would clear your lungs and open up your congested respiratory tract. And spices, which are medicinal. Many of them are medicinal. For example, maize, cardamom, are medicinal. They are not only for flavor and for making food more delicious, but they were medicinal and provides important minerals like zinc, iron. You cannot get this from the metal, but you can get it from the spice. Then lianas, all kinds of for tying, all right, besides rattan, yantok, yeah. Then exotic fauna. The Chinese were very amazed at the tropical fauna and flora. Talking parrots, very expensive. Talking parrots. The Champa people brought talking parrots. Then kingfisher birds for colorful plumage. A beautiful bird with beautiful plumage. It was used for ritual. You cannot perform certain rituals to the gods of earth and heaven, harvest gods, the god of good fortune, unless you have this plumage. And then later on in the Yuan dynasty, it was used as a stage prop for the Peking opera. All right. So the plumage. Naubos ang ating yung kingfisher, naubos because the Chinese imported this. And then don't forget the callow bird. This is Rufous hornbill, extinct now. But if you want to see one is stuffed. A Rufous hornbill is stuffed in the Institute of Biology in UP Diliman because it provided ivory, the beak. It can be red or orange. And this beak is used for ornamental purposes, for jewelry, and a substitute for ivory from rhinoceros horn and from elephants. But the ivory beak is susceptible to soft carving. And so I have seen a lot of collections, private collections in Fujian and Guangdong of merchant groups. The one in Quanzhou, they have this, all right. So to show that they're, all right, another aquatic resource, Tridacna gigas, Tridacna squamosa is also, because these are giant clams and there are scallops that look like lotus. So the Chinese attributed that the Tridacna gigas, the Tridacna squamosa were very valuable because it is the natural growth of sacred lotus to their, which is important to the folk religion in China. Then the sea turtle, Eretmoculus imbricata. The sea turtle, by the way, were found in Yin site in Henan in China. So they were importing not only Cyprea moneta from the South Seas, but turtle, and the carapace is used in Yin sign, 1600 BC. How did it get there? We don't know. All right. Then pearls, of course, mother of pearl, abalone, and so on, because of the shell, the opalescent surface of the were valued in China. And forest products included timber, lianas, rattan yantok is very important, and don't forget abaca. Abaca is used for rigging. It's very strong, salt resistant, and therefore it was used for abaca. Up to the time before the introduction of the steam engine, the rigging was abaca. That is one of the reasons why the British, the French, the Americans, the Spaniards came to the Philippines to buy abaca for rigging until about 1860, 1870. Then wild animals and hides, leather, were also used in China. So this is important. And of course, it's very strange. The Chinese valued bezoar stone, which is a anomaly in the wild pig. So it is part of the materia medica of China. Right. If you read Paul Whitley, you read Wang Gungwu, you read Oliver Walters, they use the Chinese materia medica and the pharmaceuticals to find out that, these articles came from Southeast Asia. All right. Okay. All right. Then, okay. Next slide, please. All right. Here are I will not dwell into it, but to just point out that in Butuan, the Butuan were the first to send continuously up to 1011, and then up to the 17th century. Next slide. All right. I will not. And then here's the Butuan. Next slide. These are the items, and the Chinese were, they customized their products according to our like. So they made here, kinalabasa, and this one is balimbing. Next slide. Next slide. All right, this is the kalan. I just show you. Where is the Santa Ana? Go back. All right, here, this is the kalan. This is the Malay kalan. All right, diagnostic. There is your kinalabasa and all this. Next slide. Here, next slide. Next slide. Next slide. I will just go to the last one. Next slide. We'll skip this. Skip this, please. All right. Next. Next. All right. Next. All right. Why did the Filipino long tradition of shipbuilding, seafaring peter out in the 19th century? Filipino maritime tradition weakened because of Spanish obsession of eradicating Islam. They called this project Limpio de Sangre, that caused debilitating wars between Mindanao and Sulu that disrupted what was before thriving inter-island, inter-Asian trade and fostered Muslim-Christian hostility. I will add also xenophobia. Yeah. The colonial economy was propped up by the Chinese, but the Spaniards keep on persecuting, even slaughtering the Chinese. Another major reason is the galleon trade. This had deleterious impact on the lives of the people, including Chinese residents in the country. Many of them were skillful shipwrights. Sailors lost their lives. Conscripts were forced to cut timber from forests, haul them to the shipyards, build the ship, serve the crew, and soldiers. Many villages suffered famine since they could not attend to food production. As a result, there were many uprisings throughout the duration of the galleon trade. It was disastrous to the native economy because most of the trade goods were luxuries for the Spanish and other European elites. Chinese silks, porcelain, lacquerware, tea, other manufacturers were paid for with silver mined from Potosi silver by the Mexicans, who also rebelled against Spanish colonial regime. The Spanish colonial officials, civilians, clergy, the Chinese partners got very rich. The galleons eluded English, Dutch pirates, weathered the ocean journey, and as much as 90,000, 100,000 kilos of silver ended up in China. So the Chinese merchants earned a lot. And of course, the clergy, the Spaniards. The galleon trade was most detrimental to the Philippine economy. It caused great deal of suffering and loss of life. Moreover, it caused massive deforestation and environmental degradation. Moreover, Western imperialists wrested control of trade routes and eroded Asian trade and cultural alliances. I will stop here because there is no more time. All right. Thank you. Then these are, there is no more time.
Interesting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Slim, thank you very much. Actually, that's a lot to take in fact, I believe I've seen on I've seen on Google actually that you give a lot of lectures, and I'm sure this probably would be worth quite a number of classes just to deliver. But thank you very much for I think the takeaway that you've built on the themes that of the two previous speakers have said. Apart from pride, I think the other takeaway and the key word here is connection. And you've mentioned ancient Greece, Rome, ancient Egypt, and India, and all of this. So actually, even though we're an archipelago, it proves that we're not an island. We're actually connected. We always thought of ourselves as unique, some kind of brown Americans, perhaps at some point, or because of our Spanish and American heritage. But this connects us definitely with Asia. And as just to mention one of the favorite, I think, words that you use is that the land divides and the seas unite. I think that's one of the proverbs you usually quote, and that just simply means that that we are connected, even though we're kind of on the eastern side, outside of the continent. And finally, I appreciated very much that you explained why that connection was cut. And I think what we have to do now as a task is probably reestablish our connections with maritime Southeast Asia and also the continent in Asia. So thank you very much. We still have one speaker, and I think very exciting, and definitely the last is after we've heard a lot of descriptions and the studies. I will now I have the honor now to present to you basically a little bit cut from different cloth. Also a researcher, but his expertise is basically his being in the field and being an adventurer. Our next speaker is someone I've known for more than a dozen years now, Mr. Arturo T. Valdez. I first encountered his name when at the documentary about the Philippine Everest expedition team in 2006 that was made. The team went up to Everest in 2006, won the top prize for a mountaineering documentary film festival in Moscow in 2008. But I met finally Mr. Valdez again in Hong Kong when he came with his crew on the Sultan Sinsulu, a traditionally built Balangay sailing vessel, on the return leg from Fujian province on the way back to the Philippines. So actually, Dr. Rojas Lim's presentation of talking about our connections to China fits very snugly in the presentation that we're going to have right now. And I'd just like to say, perhaps to our colleagues and in the Chinese mainland, you have a lot of materials here to plumb and to study, just so that we will all know about the heritage and also the connections perhaps to China. And so here, I'd like to now ask for the presentation of Dr. Valdez, who is actually used to be Undersecretary of Transport and Communications. And he's going to tell us a real yarn, and it's all true. That's the best part of it. So Dr. Valdez, you have the floor.
Well, Derek, thank you very much. And well, I'll be honored if I'll be a doctor, but I'm not a doctor. Anyway, Derek, and to the those into the webinar, it's been an honor to be a part of this illustrious gathering and listening to those scholars who spend most of their lives trying to look into our maritime history. And indeed, I'm learning a lot. My brain is still processing about all the lectures I'm listening. But just to give you a background, well, right after Mount Everest, I thought of what's next. I thought of why not cross the Sahara Desert. And so I thought about that project. And that's why I even made myself appointed as special envoy to the Middle East, because the whole purpose is really to have all the facilities to cross the Sahara Desert. But finally, I decided that our people will have a hard time trying to understand what is this Sahara crossing all about. So I thought, why not trace the migration of our forefathers as they left the mainland Asia. And so into this, I delved into history, and so I called it the voice of the Balangay. As I tried to look into the migration of our Austronesian-speaking ancestors. So here it is. It's a journey into history. I'll just be quick. Of course, there's so much presentation that we came from this part of the world, the mainland, the southeast, what I would call it mainland of Southeast China or Asia. And of course, we have gone all over this place as we move around, and that through this migration, central to all of this is the boat. They cannot move out without the boat. And Professor Roslyn mentioned that I thought that they cross here by land bridges, but only 150 kilometers. So beyond that, they have to build a boat. So central to all of this is the Balangay. And when I look into the Balangay, it is also looking into our history, because this guy, our national hero, keeps on talking that ang taong hindi lumilingon sa pinanggalingan, hindi makarating sa kanyang patutunguhan. And I think that is still true, very much true until today. And we should have learned from this lesson that what Rizal taught us. And I think exhaustively, everybody talked already about our thriving shipbuilding. But let me add into this discussion, because I was involved in the 500 days jump start to the 500 anniversary of the victory in Mactan, the coming of Magellan. No one talks about this guy, Panglima Awang, or Enrique de Malacca. He is the first circumnavigator in the globe. What I've heard about Sebastian Elcano, yes, it's correct, a single voyage. But when Magellan saw him and met him either in Malacca or in the Spice Island and brought him to Spain, and from Spain came back to the Philippines, this guy had completed the circumnavigation. I think the people are we have to give credit to a Malay. Of course, Malaysia is claiming him. I was in Terengganu. There's a big statue of Panglima Awang. Also in Indonesia, and I think Carlos Quirino said that he was born in Cebu. Whatever it is, he's a Malay. And it's before the coming of the colonials, and he first circumnavigated. But going back into the boat, you know, everyone has exhaustively discussed already about the boat. It is that was found in Butuan. And I think Dr. Laksina really showed the anatomy and the details of the boat that was there in Butuan. In short, Dr. Laksina exhaustively discussed the boat as they found it. My time here today, I will talk about the Balangay as I build it, as I build a real Balangay. So, to build a Balangay, I have to look for the shipwrights. Now, Dr. Rojas Lim had answered my question in my mind, because I cannot find the shipwrights between Tawi-Tawi and Batanes. How come? None. I think simply because this was discouraged by the colonial authorities. So I have to go to the National Museum, and with the help of Dr. Ois Bologna and Ray Santiago and Dr. Roquillo, they said, if you want to have your panday, you go to Tawi-Tawi. So I went to Sibutu and Sitangkay and found out that shipbuilding of this kind is a backyard industry in the island of Sibutu. So I have to look for my panday, and I found them, and they guided me. What do I need? The kind of wood, and we cut those slugs in Tawi-Tawi, in Languyan, with the help of DNR, of course, and then brought them here. So in short, let me show you briefly on this diagram illustration. From the tree, you have the planks, and then you have the keel. And there is the wingtip or panulong. You hear this one? And then slowly you put up the first plank. And from there, of course, the wing, the stern, and the bow. And then you have to add the planks, using pegs and dowels here, the wooden pegs. And then finally, you have the shape of a hull of the boat. And then the lashed-lugs. And finally, here, you do waterproofing or dot-dot. So in short, these are the tools that were used in the building of the Balangay, the boat that I built. So let me be quick in showing to you an illustration. Here is the keel, and here are the shipwrights, the master builder. Here is the master builder and his team. Of course, several of them are master builder. And here is the bow, the panulong, and then the first plank is to added. You have now the lugs. Well, this is the first Filipino who climbed Mount Everest and the first Filipina. So I did the hammer of the first plank into the keel using this sort of a mallet. I forgot how did they call this one. So, and then look at that. These are lashed-lugs, shell first construction. This is what we found in Butuan. Dr. Laxina and the team from the National Museum had found. And then these are the wooden pegs and dowels on the boat that we built. Faithful. And then we put up reasons. And then, okay, slow down. What happened? Okay, I'm sorry. I think I'm moving a little bit fast. So now, we have now into the, let me just go back to the previous one. Let me check here, the previous one. So this reason, and then this is how when you build an additional material for the planks. So this is the, you have to add, and they have the C-pit, and then, yeah, and then the C-pit, and the formation of the hull. So I just have to move a little bit slow. And this is now the hull shape is being developed. Notice always the lugs, and this was shown by our previous speakers. And then this is the last lugs. Now, what they use originally, I think, is cabo negro. It's a palm sort of a fiber. We tried to put up a cabo negro, but it's so difficult, so expensive. No one among us really the skills, but we tried. So we use either the abaca, wala pa. But we use either the abaca, so I have to slow down again a bit. Okay. Oh, now let me just go back to that. And then the last slugs. This is the last slugs. And then, of course, this is the dowels. And the pins, and there's a lock immersed into a tar. I'll just have to slow down a bit. And these are the tools that they used. These are the tools that they used. Let me go back again. Okay, I think, so I'll just have to slow down. These are the tools that they used. And then also, these are the C-pit. The C-pit that you can find. And then now we're trying to put together the tar orison. These are jellies or that stayed on the ground by giant trees, and then mixed with cocoa oil, ultimately, and then dip this. This is a cotton thread. On the left side is, of course, the anchor that we built, the natural anchor. Okay, and then the boat builder is now trying to do the dot. Is now trying to dot. I think it's quite. Am I moving too fast? Okay. And this is a dot. But let me just be quick into this. And now finally you have the boat. See how beautiful is the boat. Finally you have the boat. And the beauty of the boat here is that, it's a perfect boat. On this side, this is the waterproofing, and this is now finally the boat, Diwata ng Lahi. The boat, Diwata ng Lahi. See how perfect it is, the boat. And these are built by our shipwright the way it was. The measurement that they used is they're using the scale mm. You know what mm means? Mata-mata. They have no plans. They just simply use the knowledge that they've learned through generation, handed down. So these people, boat builders, are real treasures. Now, this is the site when I built the boat. I hope you can see it. The site was in the agricultural center of the Philippines. The site is at the natural center of the Philippines, and we have a nice hut there. And then, of course, now you can see. The next is that ultimately I have to bring the boat to the bank right there of at the edge of Manila Bay, where the boat was constructed besides the Folk Art Theater. Some problems with okay. So I hope that you can see now, still very slow, that standing at the edge of the okay, there you go, standing at the edge of Manila Bay, and then I have to worry about how can this boat jump into the water. Let's see how high it is. It's quite too high. I think more than 10 feet. But finally, I have to tie it at the back and with a 6x6 to slowly hold it as it slowly move into the waters. And finally, I prayed that the Balangay should not turn out into a Balangay submarine, because the slipway we just build it and look at how high it is. But finally, there she goes. It jumped into the water, as you can see. I hope that it is shown in your slide. Okay, let me now show it to you. It jumped into the water, and then the bow simply kissed the waters. The bow simply kissed the waters, and then finally the stern kicks into it, and then here it is right now. That's the Watan ng Lahi. And then it's ready. With the sail, we did 5 practice in Manila Bay. After the 5 practice, I said, I think that's enough. The monsoon wind have shifted. It is now the northeast wind, amihan. We have to go down south. I said, we'll learn how to sail along the way. And so that's how it was. But of course, I was confident because I have the badyaws, the boat builders with me. They were the one who really taught me and will be educating us how to sail. And we have nothing. We try to sail the way it was. It is powered by the wind and stirred by the sun, the stars, looking into the waves and then the clouds. And we learn it from the boat builders who live by the sea. And we reach Mindanao through that manner using the ancient technology. Now, if you just want to find out our whereabouts, we asked the fishermen around, "Sana ba tayo? Where are we now?" And they said, "Oh, you're already somewhere in Romblon." Okay, so we're doing fine. And that's how we learn, because we have no equipment and we have no tool. And these are the boat builders, if you have to look at them. Look at, these are a treasure. We should be able to preserve their skills. That this will keep on going, but I don't know. But they're there. These are the Sama Dilaya people, Sama tribesmen in the island of Sibutu and Sitangkay. Of course, here they are with Ambassador Kenny. He used to visit us a lot because they're all so curious about it, especially because I thought that the boat is 4th century, but even older, I thought, than the Vikings. So, finally, I sailed to Mindanao. I built 2 more boats. Here, the first boat is at the back. The second boat was built by Butuan Global Forum, the group of Judy Navarra. And the first one is the last boat I built. They called it Sama Tawi-Tawi in honor of the boat builders. And this is where when we're crossing Singapore, the busy Singapore Strait. Anyway, so I will just be quick on this. These are the maps. I hope you can see the map and the route that we have. But we sailed through central Philippines, we sailed through the western part, we sailed through the eastern part, we've gone all over. And not only that, we sailed around Southeast Asia. And even in the waters of Vietnam, hoping to continue our voyage in 2010 to go to the World Expo, except that the monsoon wind have shifted. So fatigue and homesickness ultimately forced me that time for us to go home. So, well, I'll just be quick about this, about what we have done. We undertook while we're traveling. The whole purpose of this is to stir up maritime awareness. And, Derek mentioned about connection. Somehow, all this knowledge that we have we were not able to connect it with the young. No, the voice of the Balangay purpose is really to connect to the young. Look at the crowd of people that were there visiting us. They're hungry to know more about us. So we went into the most remote, we've visited the most coastal towns in the margins and periphery of this archipelago and meet these people. Right here, we're in Maestre del Campo, an island somewhere there between Romblon and Mindoro, and we're doing lectures right there in the boat, among the young in the town of Concepcion. And look at the faces. These are the young. This is the kind of connection. To do this and to re-educate the young, we have to go back to education. And that is Department of Education. As we simply build the boat and breathe life and show these young that they can do a lot because seafaring is in their DNA. Of course, these are the activities we do: clean up, environmental, medical mission. We do rescue in actual combat. There was shooting in Mindanao. We helped and treated some people in there. And so all along, I hope that you can see all the slides. But of course, we have this other enjoyment. We can catch fish. And this, the old man and the sea, with his swordfish. We brought with us kikuman. And then we do a lot of sashimi. Not all the time the sea is calm. Look at the big waves. We've gone through 12 LPAs and typhoons and storm, and every time it scared the daylight of you when you see these big waves. And the Balangay simply surfed and sailed until ultimately the master builder, Sam Adilaya said, will tell me, "Sir, hindi na kaya ng boat natin. Kailan atras tayo dito." And that's the time when I have to turn the boat around and let the wind and the waves blow us wherever it is. At one time, several times, we're blown deep into Indonesia as we cross from Malaysia to Borneo because we got caught by a local storm. And so, the unfinished voyage to China, we did. This was our third attempt that we crossed China to commemorate the 600 years visit of Sultan Paduka to the Middle Kingdom. And of course, we came from Sulu, that boat, the three boats, and then ultimately crossed the vast South China Sea and came back here. These are the Sultan Paduka, his tomb at the embassy with the ambassador. And here is the Balangay fleet coming back home. It is already coming back home. So, of course, there's news all over about us. There's so much news about us. And we come out with a coffee table book. I think our DFA has a lot of copies of that because we supplied them. And then right now, we're in the process and working together that this Balangay will become the national boat. It's now at the Senate. Because by having a national boat, we will keep and trying to maintain into the consciousness of our people, especially the young, about this majestic and beautiful boat that our forefathers used and their waves of migration, and show the kind of development and skills that we have as a maritime people. And so here I'm just trying to show to you about an SWS survey. Our people are very attentive on something that will lift up their spirit, lift up their hopes that they can do also something that is beyond their wildest imagination. It is a way of marshaling the people desire that they can also uplift themselves and reach for the stars. And this is the survey of SWS. Our project Mount Everest, 63%. We're only beaten by negative news, excavation, evacuation from Lebanon, the Guimaras oil spill, and landslide. So the Balangay had also stirred up and excited our people. It's been covered by the news media. And so the voyage, we have challenged everybody, you come and join us. Because the Balangay can be no different from the theme that you're trying to develop right now, which is Iisang Bangka Tayo, Philippine unity in uncertain times. The Balangay can be BRP, Balangay, Barko ng Republika ng Pilipinas. It can be BRP Pilipinas. We're all aboard into it. And by being aboard only when we paddle together in the same direction when there is no wind. Because we did a lot of paddling when there is no wind. And then for the ship to continue sailing amidst the rough and stormy seas, but only being united and working together on board on the BRP Pilipinas or BRP Balangay, we can steer and navigate the ship away from the rocks, the shoals, the breakers, and other dangers that normally lurks behind, in order that this BRP Pilipinas can reach the land of its aspirations. And so, well, the Balangay is like a fresh ocean breeze that blew briefly into our national landscape in order to awaken and energize us, our maritime spirit, that indeed we are the heirs of a great maritime legacy. And so, in closing, by joining us together and being with us, you'll make this great young person happy, because we will have to pass it on to the next. We don't like the Balangay simply that it will sail into the sunset and that's the end of it. By keeping up it alive, we can pass it to the next generation about what our proud ancestors have accomplished in their great maritime voyages and industry, so that it will realize also the hopes and writing of this young, great author and hero, which I'm going to close and read what he had stated here, as he started to worry that slowly we're losing that maritime spirit. And this is what Rizal said in his book. He says, the Philippines a century hence, perhaps the people will revive their maritime and commercial activities, for which the islanders have a natural aptitude, and free once more like the bird that leaves his cage, like the flower that returns to the open air. They will discover their good old qualities, which they are losing little by little. Yes, we're slowly losing that maritime spirit and cautiousness, and again become lovers of peace, gay, lively, smiling, hospitable, and fearless. Yes, we build, we sailed, roamed, and explored the great waters of the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and South China Sea aboard a seaworthy, stable, and trusted Balangay, and the boat simply carried us safely home back to our loved ones and to our families. And more than anything else, to share with you today the story and adventure of the Balangay. Maraming salamat po. That ended my presentation. I hope you've gotten.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yusek Valdez, for your steering account. Actually, that's nothing short of National Geographic material. At the wharf, I remember at the Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club, I only saw the Balangay there. I didn't even step on board, but it's nothing short of amazing what kind of work went into it. And you're right about the power of these stories and these narratives to inspire. And I think these are the types of stories that we need. You've made the connection of all the knowledge that we've found out and are still actually trying to absorb, but you've shown how you can actually translate it and how it can be made real and actually tangible. Um, Somehow when I first heard about your attempt, the first thing that came into my mind, and perhaps some of us would also some of the audience would say the same thing. I was reminded of Thor Heyerdahl and the Kontiki, but then later on I realized that comparison would be very imprecise, because actually when you undertook this project there was absolutely no doubt about the existence of the Balangay or the role it played in ocean crossing voyages as part of our tradition and our history. And in fact, our embassy in Beijing, one aspect of what you had presented in our consulate in Shanghai, are rather familiar about the story of Datu Paduka Pahala, as they actually usually take visitors to the grave monument in Shandong. But then, of course, those old enough among us to remember would know that this true story was made into a movie, Hari sa Hari, Lahi sa Lahi, in 1987. A Filipino-Chinese co-production directed by Eddie Romero on the Philippine side and Xiaolang Lili Cho on the Chinese side. And of course, who would forget Vic Vargas in the starring role?
Yeah.
I think he was playing Datu Paduka. So just to kind of expand a little bit our circle, we do have this on this special occasion, two special guests who were part of your team, the Philippine Balangay team, and I'd like to introduce to the audience Miss Karina Dayondon and Mr. Jody Navarra. I think they're here as well on the screen. I hope they can. Just to give a few, a little, for those who might not know, but of course, Miss Dayondon is famous in her own right, because in 2018, December, she became the first Filipino woman to successfully ascend Vinson Massif in Antarctica. Basically, that was her seventh highest mountain, and she was able to accomplish climbing all the tallest mountains in all the 7 continents. And she was also, in 2006, that was the team put together by Yusek Valdez. She was actually one of the 3 Filipino women to reach the peak of Mount Everest. And right now, she's on active duty as a lieutenant junior grade officer in the Philippine Coast Guard. Just to mention, this peak she actually climbed was Denali, Mount McKinley in North America, Aconcagua in South America, Kilimanjaro in Africa, Kosciuszko in Australia, and Elbrus in Russia and Europe. And for Mr. Navarro, who is also part of that famous sail that they went on to, I think, practically all the journeys Mr. Navarro has been on. He's a retired investment banker and business executive since 2002, who has joined advocacies for the preservation of our Filipino heritage and for the conservation of our natural resources. So his involvement in all these causes are evident through his role in the educational projects of their programs and the projects that he does by making documentary films and publishing books. So perhaps our 2 special guests could just say a few words to the audience.
Derek, maybe I may have to add. I think Dr. Ted, our
yes.
doctor, the expedition doctor of Mount Everest and Balangay, I think is also on board. Dr. Ted Isguera is the guy that you can see
Dr.
every
Ted
Sunday
Isguera.
on that DCMM about disaster preparedness. So he's also aboard. We would just like to recognize him.
Thank you very much. We have to recognize Dr. Ted Isguera as well, who was involved in both. So perhaps we can ask for Ms. Karina Dayondon and Mr. Navarra to say a couple of words. Are they actually with us? If they are, okay. Just as just so that our audience would know, actually last year there was a Senate resolution which recognized the tremendous feat that Karina Doyondon actually accomplished in scaling all the seven tallest mountains in all the seven continents. So it appears they're not in the room. So what we will do right now is it would have been good actually to have them as well, at least for the audience to know, and some real heroes who are actually doing this not for the material reward, but they're doing this because of their love of the heritage that we have, and they don't want this heritage to die out. And I think it's part of our responsibility, collective responsibility, to join them and make sure that we are able to continue, so that it does not end only with our experts and our specialists, that we are able to somehow communicate this, that even ordinary Filipinos, all of us would know. So I think we're probably all of us in agreement with that, and I'd like to now go over to the next part. I hope we still have, we're 30 minutes over the time, but we'd like to take questions so that at least those who have been patient enough to skip the first part of their lunch would be able to actually have some answers. And I'm trying to look now into our box and see what kind of questions we have. So first, we have a question coming from Assistant Secretary Gariba from Mindanao. Could Professor Abrera, it's addressed to you, expand the concept of pangayaw? I don't know if I pronounced it right, or if piracy does not accurately capture the concept. So I think there's a very specific question on this. Yeah.
Yes. That is the Tagalog word, pangangayaw. Pangangayaw, in English, we can render it as raiding, but it is not specifically a raid. It was actually an economic activity. Everybody was doing it. If you had the political power, and if the community had the political power and the technological capacity to build boats, it would go on raids because it was part of extending the political influence of a community. So it was actually part of that building towards a national community, because we were then small ethnic states. So it was the Tagalogs, it was the Warays, it was the Ilocano. So these were ethnic states. It was not yet a national state. So it was going towards that. It was a movement going towards building a nation state. So they had to expand political and economic influence, and they were doing that through the pangangayaw. So if you recall, when Magellan, because this was mentioned, when Magellan came to Cebu, he had to go to Mactan because he already had an alliance with Cebu. Cebu was at war with Mactan. They were not politically. They were not allies, because Cebu was trying already to extend its power towards Mactan. So that was pangangayaw. But since Magellan was already in alliance with Cebu, he went to raid Mactan because Mactan was at war with Cebu. So he entered into a local strife between Cebu and Mactan. He got in the way and he got killed for that. Because Mactan, sina lapu-lapu naman, they knew the territory. They knew how to fight. They were experts at hand-to-hand combat. So yung pangangayaw, it was really part of that historical movement in building a national community. So, of course, raids were part of that. Those raids even continued up to the colonial period. So, the most politically coherent state that we had were the sultanates at the time of the arrival of the Spaniards. So they had the power in order to confront the colonial government that was being established in Manila. So there were raids already coming from the Sultanate going towards Manila. They passed through Leyte. These events were happening, parang they were part and parcel of that historical development. Kaya ko sinabi na it was already a political label to call them pirates because the Spanish colonial government, even before coming to the Philippines, they were already at war with the Moors. They had finished the Reconquista. Katatapos pa lang nila in reconquering Spain from Islam. And when they arrived, Islam was here. So it was just simply part of Reconquista. So naturally, they were looking at at Mindanao, the Sultanate part of the Philippines. They were looking at it as enemies because they were already enemies from Europe. Pero in the Philippines, it was not just the sultanates that were raiding. All others, Cebu was raiding, Manila was raiding, all the ethnic states that had the capacity, they were raiding because it was part and parcel of that historical development in creating a national state. That's how I can describe pangangayaw, raiding. It was really part of that period. So talagang warfare was at sea. Okay.
Thank you very much. I hope the question was answered, Assistant Secretary Garibay. That's actually quite a bit of in the sense that actually as historians they have to be very careful in using words and qualifying them because there are certain values imputed. So we'd like to now go on to the second question, and this one is from. It would be to Dr. Laksina, addressed to Dr. Laksina. Any chance from Assistant Secretary Mahilum West of ASEAN, any chance that China during ancient times learned from Southeast Asia boat building techniques? So it's a reverse. Maybe it would have been them learning from us. Dr. Laksina, perhaps you have something on that.
Yes, well, actually, the Chinese had a distinct shipbuilding and boat building tradition as well. So one example is they did use iron nails to construct their boats. And it's one of the ways that we can identify ship remains or boat remains underwater. But we have an interesting type of boat building tradition, which has been referred to as the hybrid or mestizo boat building tradition, which shares some boat building aspects from China and some from Southeast Asia, but it's not clear where this might have originated. Or another example of a Chinese boat building tradition is the use of what's this? The name is escaping me right now. The Chinese division bulkheads. That's right. So the bulkhead is a very distinctive characteristic of Chinese boat building. So when I mentioned the hybrid boat building, these boats would have bulkheads, but at the same time also use dowels and not nails that the Chinese use.
Maybe, I'm just trying to think aloud here, Dr. Laksina.
Mm-hmm.
The Hans what are the Hans? The Hans are, the Chinese are Hans, right?
Yes.
What are the Hans? Where is the area that the Hans really where is their abode? It is around Beijing, correct?
I
The Han, yeah,
believe
yeah,
so, yes.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it moved south, yes, a bit later.
Yeah, a bit later. So,
Yes.
and the people along the mainland coast are the Austronesian-speaking people. And
Yes, the
yeah, yeah,
Austronesians
yeah, yeah.
originated from southern China around
Yeah, yeah.
4,000
So,
years ago.
so
So
as the
before,
Hans,
the Austronesian speakers are not the Hans.
yeah, yeah. So as the Hans expanded, they started to push out the Austronesians. But as they go near the coast, definitely they learn how to sail from the
Yes,
people along the coast.
yes.
So when you talk about the kind of influence, I think we're the one who taught them how to sail.
It's very possible. In fact, as far as I know, the earliest remains of Chinese ships were actually riverine or coastal, so not ocean going or not
Yeah.
sea crossing.
So this is from the people that live along the coastline. As
Yes.
the Hans population expanded, they pushed them out, and the people at the coastline started to move out. Of course, somewhere in Cambodia and Vietnam, they're still there, but in southern China, that's how it turned out to be. So in a way, I think that's how they learn. They learn it from us,
Yeah.
how to sail.
I suppose that we can say that generally, but the East Asian building tradition, which we also see in Korea and Japan, is also similar.
Mhm.
So I would have to review the dates and the characteristics of the boat building of East Asia. So China would share these with Japan and Korea.
Well, they'll share that as they move towards the coast.
Yes,
But
yes.
originally, they're in the north. They're in the
Yes.
inner lands. So as
Yes.
they move into the coast, they learn how interact with the people in the coastline. That's how they learn how to sail, and then
Yeah.
develop the kind of shipbuilding along the way, and then ultimately into Korea and into Japan. But definitely, the people along the coast are Austronesians, who are basically seafaring people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So,
Derek, I may just add here, Derek.
there's a
I
bit of a
think-
delay, so
Yeah. Derek, what is important on connectivity, the lectures and what has been taught a while ago by our,
Yes.
learned scholars should really be imparted to us. And it has to start there at the grade school. And this is what I have to hammer, because until we have that, we will slowly really lose this maritime consciousness. That's we're really slowly losing it. Because now we tend to believe more that we are land-based. Look at Metro Manila, we're so crowded here.
Right.
Everything is here. When in fact the Philippines is an archipelago. We're more water than land.
Yes, actually, Yusek. In fact, just a couple of points to comment on that. One of the one of the projects that we were actually engaged in Hong Kong was actually working with a NGO that they were teaching Filipino OFWs in Hong Kong to swim, and they found out that actually, despite the fact that they live right by the coast, they grew up by the coast, they actually don't swim. So there's definitely the connection with the sea has been cut, and I think you're absolutely right that we do have to start educating more, and I think this is what the purpose of the whole Manamo idea is. And this connects with one of the questions that I received from Agana PE from Mark Hamoy, actually batchmate in Career Ministers. I'd like to read everything because there's a context of in his question, and he says that what has perplexed me throughout the years is why we seem to have lost this historical connection to the sea. For instance, we no longer have a robust boat building industry, whether for fishing or leisure. Even inter-island shipping is still highly inconvenient, if not relatively dangerous, if the number of lives lost at sea every year is any indication. And only recently are we now seeing a concerted effort at strengthening our ability to defend our maritime domain. So that's basically the prelude. But the question is, what explains this apparent incongruity between our archipelagic and maritime tradition with how we have developed, or rather failed to develop, the sectors related to our geographic reality? Part of the question perhaps is that we later had deep-seated negative connotations associated with seafaring and ocean voyages because of the abusive colonial practices imposed by the Spaniards. So I'd like to perhaps lead off with Dr. Rojas Lim, and perhaps any other panelists or speakers would like to add to and answer that question herself or himself. Dr. Lim, perhaps. Or anyone, if Dr. Lim is not available right now. Anyone would like to...
I'll just add a data, Derek. When we sailed around the country, we made 84 stops. Every time I make stopover, especially in major ports, not on the coastal.
What we need to do is look at the seas as avenues of communication. So don't look. The Chinese made the mistake in claiming all their 9-dash line. So they they box themselves in. But if they negotiate with all the littoral countries together, instead of claiming sovereignty is not important. What is important is you take good care of the resources, you cooperate, and share resources, share responsibility. So the Chinese box themselves by claiming the whole. Sovereignty is not important. What is important? We collectively take good care of the ocean, of the resources. Cooperate. Don't kill each other. That's stupid. We have to persuade all governments to sit down and keep talking. And then also, I think our embassy in Beijing should also tell the government of China that their fishermen, their fishing boat, their maritime militia should be more look kindly on the Filipino fishermen. What happened to Jember? The claim of the Chinese fishermen is that they were being harassed by a combination of Vietnamese and Filipino fishermen. That's not good excuse, because under the International Maritime Organization, you have to, what we call SOLAS, safety of life at sea. The bigger boat, the better equipped boat must try to save accidental collision. So the embassy in Beijing should tell the government of China, tell your maritime militia not to be aggressive. Don't do that again.
Life at sea. Thank you very much, Dr. Lim. Actually, there's the delay is hard to tell. Yeah, but those are actually very important points, and thank you very much for making them. I'd like to again perhaps get another question, because we do have a bit more left. This is definitely important from our old boss, Ambassador Calonge. Question. Now that we know of our shipbuilding tradition, how can we use this skill to jumpstart our shipbuilding industry? So I guess since it's not addressed to anyone specific, perhaps someone would like to jump in.
Derek,
Yes, you can.
You know where's a shipbuilding? You go to Nabutas River and you'll just see how pitiful, and you'll be shocked how even the area of shipbuilding. Because I went there and have the boat Balangay fixed dry dock, and as I went, you can hardly just cross into that passage. And looking at it, is this what is left with our maritime shipbuilding? So I think there's so much that we have to look into. Here we talk about the Philippines and archipelago, but there is a disconnect between what is there about us before and today. And that has to be addressed, because to be honest about it, when I sailed around, I asked how many people know how to swim. You'll be happy if you're about 1/4 of the people who knows how to swim. Everybody is afraid of the waters. And that's why Rizal said, I hope that we can revive that. And this is what the Balangay wanted to achieve. And I think we have enough materials presented by these scholars that will re-educate our people about our maritime spirit and pride. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, that's true about Navotas. You're absolutely right, Yusek. Yeah, perhaps again, we will try to get something a bit more practical, although I'm sure inspiring a lot of people from the exposure and the knowledge that we're taking in right now. It's actually the next step, what we do that would lead to something like policies or something more solid. Perhaps anyone else would like to comment on the question asked by Ambassador Calonge?
Yes, may I add something?
Yes, Dr. Laxina.
I'm not sure if it's an answer, because it's actually, to be honest, quite a challenge. For me, from the point of doing research on traditional boat building, it was so difficult because there were no sources. Very few people actually studied existing boat building during their time, and we're still doing that today. Very few people are examining what our indigenous boats, how they were built, what changes they have undergone. I mean, even the transition from sail and manual propulsion to motorized propulsion just went by with hardly anybody recording anything. We just know that it increased towards after the Second World War, when the Americans came to the Philippines. But even, yes, we need to just put a focus on what watercraft we have today, and then connect that to what we had before, and keep that in our consciousness. So I'm sorry it's not an answer, but yeah, it's one of the things on my wish list.
Yes.
But
I
yes,
would
thank
like
you
to-
very much for that nuanced observation. Definitely, it adds to the understanding that we have. I'd like to perhaps ask another one, move on to a couple more so that we could at least maybe finish some of the ones that we've taken in. And this is something for any speaker, again, to just jump in and perhaps answer. Considering our long history in seafaring and boat building, do we still have a hope or future in developing further the said industry for economic development? This is from a former colleague from Seoul, Rose Malikse, now at Oscar. I don't know if that actually covers some of the considerations or ideas, because in a way, we've been empowered by the knowledge, but we're kind of unsure or uncertain where to go or what next step to take. So perhaps, again, I throw this to all the speakers who would like to jump in.
Well, what we need to do is develop
Dr. Lim.
education. The UP has Marine Science Institute. Their interest is oceanography. But shipbuilding, ship repair, our government has been negligent, did not support our shipbuilding, ship repair. I've been talking to shipbuilders and ship repairers in our country because the government encourage foreign direct investment. Pinauutang pa sila. Ha? Pero yung mga Pilipino na boat builders, ship repairers, they are put in a very crowded place. Yung mga magagandang ports and shipbuilding yard, binigay sa Hanjin. Pinautang ng pera yung Hanjin na yan. And they defaulted on their loans. Then we give very nice facilities, tax rebate to foreign shipping companies. But yung Filipino naghihirap. So I have been working in Hasaan and Herma in hirap na hirap sila. Hindi sila tinutulungan. So, and another thing, our educational system, yung mga maritime schools, they do not teach the pupils shipbuilding and ship repair. They are trained to man the ship. Para silang recruiting agency. They do not, in fact, they are maritime schools, they walang barko. they are just recruiting. They sell labor. But what we need to do in the UP, about 5 years ago, they sent Bea to study shipbuilding engineering. 4 na taon yun sa England. Pag-uwi dito, after serving a few months, he became president of MOAO. Kinalimutan na nila. And then the UP gave up on maritime engineering. So the government should support shipbuilding, not only fishing, not only selling labor, but also ability to build our ships. And I sent you my essay on maritime action plan. Yeah, and that essay specifies what we should do to improve our shipbuilding, ship repair. Our even banking system is wrong. Inautang yung mga foreigner, yung mga Pilipino ayaw pa utangin.
I agree with the previous speakers. It is really a story of marginalization of our own indigenous knowledge. Because if you see, even at the present, we still have that indigenous boat building tradition. We still have indigenous boat builders, but where will we find them? At the outliers of our geographic map. It is in Batanes and it is in Tawi-Tawi, at the farthest ends of our political center. Why is that? Because that marginalization started to begin when colonial government began. Because what happened when the government was no longer in Philippine hands? Colonial government was land-based. Kaya yung ating mga towns, which were coastal towns, they began to be moved into pueblos, which were inland, because they were land-based transportation. They were coming from countries with land-based transportation. They were not using rivers and seas to communicate and to link them up. So we were slowly being marginalized from our geography, from our traditions, and from our expertise. And it began. So it's a very long story of marginalization and neglect, and that is why it's very important that we're having this. Slowly, we are recalling our past. We are recalling that this is our expertise, and this is what we have to be aware of, and we need to do more research on this, so that being knowledgeable about our past and about our capacities, then we can be proud of it, and we can begin to rebuild what we still have. So it's really an awareness of our own capacity.
Derek, amin ako dyan kay Dr. Abiera. Talagang that's how we turn out to be. You know, we tried, riding on that Balangay, it's also a scary journey. You have not been into the middle of the storm. You have nothing to hold but your prayers. But it's a way of trying to educate our people. Because, seeing us arriving half naked, totally burned, exhausted, after so much rowing, that's the shortest way to teach maritime.
Yeah, that's very true, sir. Actually, it's a very thorny question.
Maritime.
You're absolutely right. Well, I'll just turn to something a little bit different, because I don't want us to feel a little bit. There's definitely hope, and there's definitely things we can do. What we could do is probably deconstruct and just kind of see where we can go from here. But one question, a very specific one, and probably does not require a couple of questions, very specific, doesn't require too long answers. One question from Miss Eleanor de la Cruz to Yusek Valdez. How much did it cost to build your boat? Or at least in this case, I think 3 boats.
No, the diwata ng lahi cost about 2 million at that time. But ang kahoy libre, DNR provided the wood at that time. So right now it will cost more than that. Free wood, because we cut the wood in Langmoyan. So there's nothing in that boat except lang na gumawa kami ng layag, and that's it, natural, and then off we go. That time, that was 2009. So I don't know now, you have to add 2009 with the first boat that we built. And
More.
and we
yeah.
sailed it the way it was. You know why I'm confident in spite of 5 practice Manila Bay? Nandun yung mga badyaw eh. Sila yung master. They're the master of the boat. They're the one who knows how to sail. So we learn along the way. So
Right.
ultimately, after so many months and ultimately years, so we know how to sail. Ngayon wala na sila, kami na lang. But you know, I'll tell you, the water's really rough nowadays. Global warming is really turbulent.
Okay. Yeah, that's something again to think about. Actually, the Bajaus being ocean going and basically borderless people. I'd like to now, because we're probably on the last part of our already extended by 1 hour, but just a couple more, last 2 questions, perhaps. This is for Dr. Laksina. If I may, from MGB, Yolanda Aguilar, if dating buried boats, maybe we can study the sediments around the boat rather than studying the wood used in the boat construction. So it's half question, kind of trying to clarify from our colleague from MGB.
Oh yes, definitely. I agree wholeheartedly. The problem is our excavations have been limited by a number of problems. So it's only a matter of time. The National Museum actually endeavored to create the Butuan Archaeological Park and acquire some of the properties where the boats were found, where they were deposited. And hopefully in the future, yes, that's a priority.
So, speaking of the National Museum, a specific question actually from Ms. Karina Dayondon to Dr. Laksina. What is the status of the wooden Balangay boat, Diwata, that was loaned to the National Museum?
Yes, that was, it's currently in storage, and yes, it had to be protected. It was previously on display in front, at the back of the National Museum of Fine Arts facing Taft Avenue, and it's now undergoing preservation and in storage.
Okay. So basically, I'd like to end perhaps with just one very quick question before we round it up. Is there a book about Philippine seafaring history? Anyone perhaps who knows the answer could go at it? Philippine seafaring history. Maybe we need to publish a book if we don't have one. We don't have one. Okay. Okay, so that's something maybe our colleagues at
Only
Oscar,
articles, not a book.
Yes, Professor.
We only have articles, journal articles, but not
Ah.
a book, something that you can refer to, not a reference book.
Okay,
Simply
maybe
journal article.
that's an idea for a project that we could probably look into and maybe gather the experts. So maybe we will. We also have Dr. Laksina, who's from National Museum. Perhaps that's something we could also partner with or work on. So at this juncture, actually, we still have some questions, and I'm really sorry that we are not able to ask all of them. Otherwise, we would be here all afternoon. But I'd like to call on at this point our Executive Director, Emmanuel R. Fernandez, to give a last comments, perhaps, before we close. Ex-Dear Fernandez.
Okay, thank you, Derek, and good afternoon to everybody. This webinar has been so exciting, we literally lost track of time. So I'll make sure that my remarks will be very, very short. First off, I would like to thank our very distinguished speakers for enriching our knowledge and deepening our appreciation of the Balangay and what it reveals to us about our history and culture. May I invite everyone to please give our speakers a virtual round of applause. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you out there for joining us in this webinar and for enriching our discussion with your questions. You know, one of the insights that we could draw from today's webinar is that our ancestors were explorers who were not afraid to cross the vast oceans and seas and venture into the unknown. Before Ferdinand Magellan and his men arrived on our shores, our ancestors had already reached many distant shores using vessels that were so technologically advanced, such as the Balangay. The Balangay, in fact, made such a strong impression on Magellan's chronicler, Antonio Pigafetta, that he did not fail to mention in his journals. I believe that this desire for exploration, this yearning to venture into the unknown, is actually part of our collective DNA as Filipinos. In our time, in a way, it is manifested in our OFWs, millions of them, who have crossed the vast oceans and reached many shores in search of greener pastures, new opportunities, perhaps for sheer adventure. Our OFWs are, for me, modern-day explorers, inflamed by the same desire that inflamed our ancient ancestors. But, and I would like to underline this, there are many other ways by which the rest of us could also carry out our inherited drive for exploration, our inherited craving to venture into the unknown. Right now, there are still many frontiers that have yet to be discovered in the depths of the ocean, on the heights of outer space, in the different spheres of human knowledge. The world literally needs explorers who are brave enough to venture into these uncharted frontiers. And based on what we heard today about the character of our ancestors, we Filipinos have what it takes to answer that need. Thank you very much, and good day to all of you.
Thank you very much. On that note, I'd like to again thank everybody, all our speakers, Dr. Abrera, Dr. Laxina, Dr. Rojas Lim, Yusek Valdez. Of course, I'd also like to thank for all of us staying here until this skipping lunch, essentially. Ex-Dear Fernandez, as Assistant Secretary Bailen, thank you very much for kicking this whole after morning off. We also have our Director, Francis Herrera. I think special thanks. I would like to mention Director Jeremy Barnes of the National Museum for all the help in supporting us for this morning. And of course, it's important that technically this would not have been possible had we, one moment, I have to basically thank OAMS, of course, Assistant Secretary Macaraig. We have our Acting Director Robel Tixon, April Aliwalas, and our MOAO technical team, Melanie Castillo, Daniel Escalante, Maureen, Danica Baula, Maurice Jan Briones, and Romark Tabilog. And before formally closing, I'd like to let everybody know that we have actually one of the projects that we have very popular right now, and perhaps you'd like to get into it, is that we designed some stickers, basically cross-platform stickers for Viber, Telegram, and WhatsApp that you can download and basically expand the knowledge in a fun way, consciousness about maritime and archipelagic nations awareness to all your friends by using the stickers. Just either use the QR code or enter the code, and you can download for free indefinitely. You can use it not just for this year, but essentially forever. So yes, thank you very much again for bearing with us despite 1 hour, 13-minute or 14-minute overtime. But we've had a very full morning, full. Our heads are full, our hearts are full, and I think this just empowers us even more as Filipinos as we think of what to do next, so that we will not only stop at this point with the knowledge that we have and the feelings and the passion that were essentially inflamed and essentially lit up with what now we now know. We hope that perhaps partnering with our internal publications, we can put this out in book form, because we already have a lot of requests from different offices and individuals who want a copy. And of course, we will ask our speakers to make available their expertise and their writings, so that we could put it together in one volume. And then another last point is that we will have this as a recording. And please write us, and we will supply you with the link. I think the office OAMs will give us a link so that we can have this saved for posterity. Not exactly sending it up in the Voyager to explore interstellar travel, but it will be there as a permanent record. Hopefully, as long as there's YouTube. So again, thank you for all the participants, Assistant Secretary, colleagues, ex-dear, for bearing with us, and thank you for very exciting morning. Stay safe, and hope to see you soon, and actually in real life. We would like to shake your hands, each one of you, and actually be in permanent contact from now on. All the best to everyone, and good afternoon. Bye-bye.